we present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud, and Aimi MacDonald in Just a Minute. And as the minute horse fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you just heard, we welcome back to the show lovely Aimi MacDonald, who is going to represent the ladies and try and do battle with these three stalwart, devastating men who are so frightening the way they play the game. I'm sure you're going to do very well, Aimi. May I remind you, it's just as before. I'm going to ask them to try and speak for just a minute on some unlikely subject without hesitation, without deviation, and without repeating themselves in any way at all. If they can do that, they will gain points, and the others may challenge them if they think they are guilty of not doing it. This is the way we play, and I think the rest will become apparent as we continue. And Kenneth Williams, we'd like you to begin this week. The subject is policemen. Can you talk on that subject for 60 seconds, starting now?
Well, quite recently, one of them came up to me and said, "Here, say something funny." And I couldn't think of anything even remotely comical at that particular period. But I went later to a banquet given by 400 policemen, H Division actually, and was asked to make a speech. I got up there and I said to him, I said, the mask of tragedy and the mask of comedy are but one.
Derek Nimmo, why do you challenge?
Two masks.
Two masks, yes, I quite agree. That was a repetition.
Oh, you're a fool to yourself.
But I agree with your challenge, Derek, so that means you gain a point and you take over the subject with 31 seconds for policemen, starting now.
Well, like Kenneth Williams, I too enjoy police balls. I went to one...
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Repetition.
Yes, I agree with the challenge. You gain a point and you take over the subject with 28 seconds left. Policemen, starting now.
On my way to the studio this evening, I came through Hyde Park, and a policeman came up to me by most belligerently
Kenneth Williams,
rapping his knuckles against the window of my car.
Kenneth Williams
And I
has
stopped
challenged
and I
you.
said, "Take your..."
Yes, it was hesitation.
It was a hesitation. So, Kenneth, I agree with the hesitation, and you take a point, and there are 21 seconds left for policemen, starting now.
Policemen can be extremely useful in a ticklish situation, and when I was apprehended once by a dreadful lout, I called for the aforesaid mentioned dignitary.
Aimi MacDonald, why have you challenged?
Deviation. He's talking about louts now.
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't.
Yes.
I didn't.
Yes.
I
Oh,
didn't say
yes.
anything of the kind.
You did say about a lout? Yes.
Well,
you
that's
did.
apropos of calling the policeman. I started off by saying how
Yes,
useful
you're
they
going to go
are.
on about him being a lout.
Oh, yes. You can't have that. With a lady present.
Go on a bit. So ungallant.
Oh, perhaps I should go into purger or something.
So, Aimi, you have gained your first point, and you have 6 seconds left for policemen, starting now.
Policemen are usually very tall and masculine. They wear navy blue uniforms.
Well, the whistle going there tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains an extra point. On this occasion, it was Aimi MacDonald. You'll never believe the subject that's coming up for the next round. It's called rubbish. Aimi, will you try and talk on the subject of rubbish for 60 seconds, starting now?
There are very different forms of rubbish. One is the sort of rubbish that one puts in one's garbage can. There's another sort of rubbish, which is what one talks sometimes. A lot of people talk rubbish. Politicians, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud.
Derek Nimmo, you challenged.
Deviation.
Why?
I talk very good sense.
You don't talk very good rubbish as well. So Aimi MacDonald has another point in 42 seconds. To continue with rubbish, starting now.
I always seem to have an awful lot of rubbish because I collect a lot of things. And once in a while I have a great big clearing out session in which I throw out all my rubbish. I usually have collected by this time a great deal, i.e. old letters,
Clement Freud, you challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes. So, Clement, I agree this time. You have a point, and there are 21 seconds left for rubbish, starting now.
Some time ago in the City of London, there was a strike of refuse collectors, as a result of which we had one of the finest assemblies of tin cans, cardboard boxes, old pieces of toast, new lumps of bacon
Kenneth
rind.
Williams, you challenged. Hesitation. Kenneth, you take over the subject of rubbish with 7 seconds left, starting now.
We were all reminded during the recent strike what wonderful men
Clement
those
Freud,
people
why do you
are,
challenge?
and I think we should pay a tribute. I think we
You've
should
been
all
challenged,
pay a
Kenneth.
tribute to the greatness. of
Clement,
those
why
men.
did you challenge?
Deviation.
And the people that
Why
go
was
down
it devious?
sewers. That is
Because
why
the
people go
strike
down
was-
sewers.
Why did you challenge?
Deviation.
Why?
The strike was not recent.
To some people, recent means last week. To others, it means last month or even the month before. Therefore, Kenneth, I agree with you. You have another point, and there are 3 seconds left for rubbish, starting now.
Those noble dustmen, I salute them. Even as they come round the corner, I cry out, lovely lads! Good for you, lads!
He's still going on. Never anybody go on after the whistle for such a long time. But, Kenneth, you have got the lead now.
Oh, lovely. Oh,
A very
lovely.
definite lead at the end of that round. But, Derek Nimmo, it is your turn to begin the next round. Hummingbirds. Will you talk on that subject for just a minute, starting now?
When I was going through Jesmond in Newcastle some 3.5 weeks ago, it was a Thursday afternoon, round about 3:30, and all of a sudden, over a convent wall, I heard a droning sound. I looked over this aforesaid piece of stonework, and there I saw a collection of convent girls, all in a circle, and going, very short one, so it wouldn't be repetitious, you see. And then I said, "What are you doing, little ladies?"
Aimi MacDonald, you've challenged. Why?
Deviation. Well, he hasn't actually said hummingbirds yet, has he?
Oh, but I think
not
he's made it
talking
quite
about-
clear to us that those little girls in there were hummingbirds. You see, as you're a very pretty little bird yourself, Amy, you don't realise that that's how we chaps talk about girls, you see. So, Derek Nimmo has another point, and there are 33 seconds left for hummingbirds, starting now.
Well, the first time I ever met one, I went into a dance hall in Liverpool, the Grafton Rooms, and I went over to this very pretty woman sitting inside, and I said, "Excuse me, could I have the pleasure of this dance?" She said, "No, ask me, mate, I'm sweating." And I must say, she was really quite the hummiest bird that I've ever met. And then after that, I went to the tropics of Africa, and there I saw a lovely flight in the sky of little tiny birds coming towards me, and I thought, "Oh, I know what they are! They are, I know, hummingbirds! My goodness, what a thrill!" And I snapped away.
Well, that is the first time for quite a time that somebody who has started with the subject, in spite of interruptions, has also finished with it, which Derek Nimmo did just then. Congratulations, Derek. You have another 2 points through that round, and your hummingbird certainly, you kept going marvellously through the audience laughter, too. But you're only in second place, alas, at the end of that round. Kenneth is still in the lead. Clement Freud, will you begin the next round? My fans. Will you talk about them? 60 seconds, starting now.
My fans are numerous. There is, to begin with, a Mrs. Johnson who lives at 14 Railway Cottages, Burnley, and also Miss Violet.
Derek, you're challenged.
The hesitation, because
Yes.
he can't remember Violet's son.
I don't think he can remember his fans.
That's
This is
right.
completely dried
That
up
was
after
the
Violet.
problem.
So there we are. 47 seconds, Derek, for my fans, starting now.
Well, I have a most wonderful collection of fans, actually. I keep them in a glass case in my dining room. Some of them are Chinese ones, which are made, some with feathers, really. I've got a lovely peacock feathered fan, which is really the pride of my collection.
Clement, why have you challenged?
The feathers.
Peacock feathered fan.
We had a repetition of feathers.
I don't remember it.
Oh, I do. Yes.
Rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
Clement Freud's family says yes. What do the rest of the audience say? Have we had a repetition of feathers? If you agree, will you cheer? If you disagree, will you boo? And will you all do it together now? We have not had a repetition.
You wait.
They will have to wait. 37 seconds, Derek, for you to continue with my fans, starting now.
Well, there is also a lady...
Kenneth Williams, why Hesitation, Kenneth, I agree. You take over the subject of my fans. 35 seconds, starting now.
I'm made of rice paper, and in moments of great heat or passion, I frequently move them agitatedly so as to create a sort of breeze, or eo, or zephyr, as some people call them. My ardour may be cooled. I'm always fanning me ardour, you see.
Clement Freud challenged you before that.
A repetition of ha. He went ha 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 ha.
A very clever challenge, yes, true. So, Clement, I quite agree, and even clever way of challenging them, Hesitation. 18 seconds left, Clement. My fans starting now.
Many of them write to me, often on envelopes which have no stamps, which means that I have to pay an extra 8p, in some cases 10p, in order to receive such communications as they have.
Derek, why have you challenged?
I can't believe they're fans if they write them without putting stamps.
I can, if they're Clement Freud's fans. So Clement Freud has another point, and there are 7 seconds left, my fans, starting now.
You are absolutely my favorite tap, is the usual beginning, although there are some that start, Dear Mr. Freud.
Well, that's Clement Freud who's speaking when the whistle went, then he gains an extra point. It's a very interesting situation now. The three men are equal in the lead, and Aimi is only just a little way behind the chaps. Kenneth, will you begin the next round? My best points. Were they the ones you were fanning in the last round? Anyway, will you talk about them for just a minute if you can, starting now?
I very nearly wasn't able to because you practically took the words out of my mouth. But the nose has been likened to the Blackwall Tunnel, and the neck to a swan, later in actual fact, and the lips are generous to a fault. I've had that said to me. What an orifice. I've had that. They said. And the resonance, of course, you will note that the voice has this mellifluous carrying quality. Oh, it floats upon the ear like the sweet south that breathes upon a bank of violets, stealing and giving odor. Oh, I almost stun myself sometimes with the talent, with the listing of your good points, you see. And I think it's a good...
Aimi MacDonald, why have you challenged?
Repetition.
What?
Well, he's going on about himself all the time.
You never put it better, Aimi. He really is going on about himself. But as it's my best points of the subject, I think he's entitled to go on for once. So, Kenneth, I will let you continue to go on about yourself. And there are 14 seconds left, starting now.
Well, it was suggested I dye my hair, because somebody said that's not one of your best points, I can tell you. But I thought, no, weekly I'd have to be coping with the chemicals, and the roots would probably go rotten. I had seen somebody else's, and they went green.
Well, once again in this... Control yourself, Kenneth.
Have I leapt in?
Yeah. Beg your pardon?
In the lead?
Oh, yes, I see what you mean. Yeah. Yes, you definitely leapt into the lead.
Oh, I hope I can sustain it.
You have a 2-point lead over all the others. Aimi MacDonald, will you begin the next round? Kenneth has just told us one of his best points was not his hair. Undoubtedly yours is, and that is the subject on the card, hair. Will you talk about that for just a minute, starting now?
Well, there are many different types of hair. Some is long, some short, some is thick, some is thin. Derek Nimmo has brown hair. I've got blonde hair. Kenneth Williams has got mousy hair.
I must explain to the listeners that Clement Freud challenged just before Aimi MacDonald got to the description of his hair. And why do you challenge me?
That was only one of the points.
Have you any others, very quickly?
A repetition of hair.
Yes, we did have too much. You can mention the subject on the card, Aimi, but not more than about 3 times. I mean, 33 is a bit going it, isn't it? 45 seconds left for hair, Clement, starting now.
I used to have an abundant growth of hair. It was luscious, luxuriant, and covered right down towards a widow's peak. Shut up.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Shut up, deviation.
You're absolutely right, but I will score no points on that round because I think that Clement was put off by Kenneth's actions. So we continue with Clement. 30 seconds left, hair starting now.
When I was a small boy, it was fair, and it gradually grew darker until in the end it fell away. And I decided, in view of the fact that it was a necessary commodity, to allow it to continue to bud all over my face, cover my chin and my upper lip, which in common parlance is known as a beard and a moustache and sideboards, which I now sport, to the general satisfaction of my entire family, who would in fact have me more hirsute than
Well, as Clement Freud is speaking, when he gains an extra point, and he's now in the lead alongside Kenneth Williams. Clement Freud, it's your turn to begin, and the subject is getting up in the morning. Can you talk for just a minute on that, starting now?
Getting up in the morning is a fairly easy thing to do, especially if Aimi MacDonald is trailing. What you do is you listen to the alarm clock, and when it finally finishes chirping, you brush the aforementioned female member of the panel.
Hesitation.
Yes, I quite agree. He was getting a bit troubled by Aimi MacDonald's thoughts he'd created, I think, at the beginning. So, Kenneth, I agree with you. You have a point, and you have 42 seconds left for getting up in the morning, starting now.
You rise in the early morn, the waking thoughts of clarity in the Nile, to open that very quickly the ocean creases sparkles where the west, where Ulysses, the subject here, drove Lord of Boston safely.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Well, the subject is getting up in the morning and not rubbish. Deviation.
Yes, I agree. This is rubbish. So, Derek, you have a point, and there are 36 seconds left for getting up in the morning, starting now.
Of course, I get up with the lark. When that little bird sings...
Kenneth Williams, why have you challenged?
Deviation.
Why?
It's nothing to do. It couldn't possibly get up with a lark.
I quite agree. It's a wonderful picture of Derek trying to get up with a lark. So I think it's such a delightful challenge. I must give you a point, Kenneth, and say there are 34 seconds left for getting up in the morning, starting now.
The best way to do this is fill your heart with hope, which, as Byron says, always sail on a snowy
Derek,
sea.
why have you challenged?
It's a poetry recital. Deviation.
He's talking about getting
with the
up,
lark.
dear.
The poetry, it may be a poetry recital, but there's nothing in the rules which says you can't speak poetry.
No, there isn't, you see.
Kenneth has a point, and he continues the subject. 26 seconds, starting now.
Off with the pajamas and into the bath and the tingling...
Derek, why have you challenged?
He's up.
In fairness, Derek, I will give it to you, because one has to give the benefit of the doubt occasionally, and this time it must come your way, and the audience obviously agree. 22 seconds left, getting up in the morning, starting now.
I lie there with my head on the pillow and I think, is it time?
Clement, why have you challenged?
He's down.
Oh, it's really exciting, I think.
Oh, win a point for being up, you can win a point for being down. Clement Freud has a point, and there are 20 seconds left, starting now.
I raise my head slowly before slipping my legs over the side of the bed and gently pulling down my pyjama trousers. Then pushing up...
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Filth. Absolute filth. No excuse. Not getting up. Just
I wear a kilt under my pyjama trousers.
Now that would be devious.
But it wouldn't be filth.
I agree. I have to say, within the rules of the game, the Clement Freud has another point, and there are 8 seconds left for getting up in the morning, starting now.
A small tea-making machine ticks away while I'm in the process of rising from the sheets and pillows, blankets...
at the end of that hilarious round, Kenneth Williams and Clement Freud are equal in the lead, and Derek is just 1 point behind. And Amy is still in much the same position as she was before, but we are expecting great things now, Amy. A fur tippet is the subject, and Kenneth, it's your turn to begin. 60 seconds starting now.
This is something I believe the late Nellie Wallace made famous. She wore this thing round her neck. I think they are very attractive myself, but of course they're considered out of fashion in this.
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
I couldn't hear it.
You're not the only one. I couldn't hear it either. But you can't challenge for that, so I suppose Kenneth has another point.
It's repetition. I couldn't hear any of it.
He was definitely making a noise, so you cannot challenge for
It
repetition
was a
of silence.
repetitious, unhearable noise.
No, you said you couldn't hear it, so you're challenging for repetition of silence, so therefore Kenneth must logically have a point. Whether it's fair or not, I don't know, but it's logical. So Kenneth has a point, and there are 45 seconds left for a fur tippet starting now.
A fur tippet really should be discussed by a lady or a couturier, put it that way, and not by a man. A man is hardly...
Clement, why have you challenged?
I said a man twice.
And Clement Freud challenged?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I've got the buzzers wrong. Have I? Amy MacDonald, you challenged, did you?
Right.
Oh, was that right? Oh, Amy, I'm so sorry. The buzzers, ladies and gentlemen, listeners. Slight difference. I have a lot of buzzers here. Amy MacDonald, I'm delighted to know that you challenged for a repetition of man.
But I didn't.
Yes, well done, Amy. Well done. A very clever challenge. You were very observant. You got in very quickly that time. Now, Amy, the subject is the fur tippet, and there are 37 seconds left starting now.
Well, if I was the fur tippet, I'd like to be put on a very expensive coat. There I would lie across the shoulders in all my glory. And I would entice all the ladies walking down the street and looking at me through the shop window to come in and buy me. And I would have a very good home, and I would be worn such a lot with tremendous aplomb, and I...
Derek, why have you challenged?
Deviation. She's not a fur tippet.
But she did establish right at the beginning, if I was a fur tippet, this is what she'd do.
It doesn't it?
Was there one?
Gives her a point.
Yes, indeed. Oh, how gallant these fellows are. Gallant, did I say? Well, they're also gallant and gallant. So, Amy, you ready to start, Amy? Good. Well, I'll give you the word. There are 11 seconds left. Fur tippet starting now.
Well, if I wasn't a fur tippet, then I would like to be a fur coat, because then I could put a fur tippet...
Well, challenge.
She's never become a fur coat.
Derry came in far too quickly then. It was very unfair. Very unfair. Because Amy was going to say that if she was a fur coat, she'd have a fur tippet on it. So there we
Of course.
Of course. So, Amy, you have 4 seconds left for a fur tippet starting now.
So, if I was this fur coat, you see, and I had this lovely...
Clement, why have you challenged?
Oh, repetition.
I haven't given her a point yet.
Well, in that case... Well, you've certainly given her one now with that disastrous challenge. So, Amy, you have another point. There are 1 second left for a fur tippet starting now.
Fur tippet.
As Amy was speaking, as the whistle went, she gained yet another point, and I'm afraid that is the end, not only of the round, but also of this particular edition of Just a Minute. Amy MacDonald leapt up from 4th place into, believe it or not, 2nd place, alongside Derek Nimmo, and they are both equal in 2nd place. Now, and they are both in 2nd place because for the first time we have 2 winners, and only 2 points ahead of these two were a lovely couple. The inseparable couple on my right, whose romance has blossomed and gone through trials and tribulations until, on this particular edition of Just a Minute, they have come out hand in hand together, winners, with 2 points lead over the others. Congratulations to our joint winners.
Thank you. Thank you. On behalf of Ken, I thank
I'm sorry that's all we have time for, because we, once again, have really enjoyed playing Just a Minute. We do hope that you've enjoyed listening to it. Goodbye from us all. Goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The program was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Simon Brett. We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud, and Sheila Hancock in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, and welcome once again to Just a Minute, the game in which verbal dexterity is only outshone by verbal ingenuity. And here we have those four verbal intellectuals to play and show their verbal virtuosity. And I am going to ask them all once again to speak, if they can, for just a minute on some unlikely subject that I will give them without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject in any way at all. And they will gain points according to how well they do this. Let us begin the game this week with Derek Nimmo. Derek, can you talk about false teeth for 60 seconds, starting now?
It's a very embarrassing subject, Falsey. I must confess, actually, I do happen to have a couple of little ones, really, which I had knocked out the real ones when I was at school, and I then had a little plate made, which stuck in on two little wire hooks round the corners, really. And then one day, I remember, I swallowed them, and I was sent home from school, and there were long, anxious moments while relations foregathered, waiting for them to reappear. Eventually...
Clement Freud has challenged. Why?
Repetition.
Of what?
The teeth, if they reappear.
I think that is one of those very clever challenges that I can award a point for cleverness, but as it's not truly within the context of the game, I will leave the subject with Derek Nimmo and ask him to continue for another 35 seconds on false teeth, starting now.
Well, when they finally came back, I gave them a good scrub and popped them in again. And after that, they were absolutely splendid for a long time. I remember going into the theatre, and I was in a play called Who Goes There? And one day I was on the stage, and I'd forgotten to put a bit of sticky stuff to keep them down, and all of a sudden they popped out again, and into a Busby that I was carrying on my knee at the time. And I spent a long time looking in the hair, trying to find them, turning upstage. But finally they came back, and then I went, I remember another time.
Clement Freud, you challenged again.
Repetition is the third time the teeth have come out and gone in.
Yes. He's definitely not only said they went in again, but he's also established they went in again. So, Clement Freud, I agree with your challenge. I give you a point. You take over the subject, and there are 11 seconds left for false teeth, starting now.
Well,
Oh.
Sheila Hancock,
Oh,
you
dear.
challenge.
I thought he was hesitating, but he said it. No, because he always buzzes me for hesitation while I take a breath, so
Yes.
I thought I was going to try and do
I
it for him.
think, Sheila, considering how sharply Clement plays the game, you're absolutely right to try and get in there.
Yeah.
I won't give any points for that. I will just tell Clement that he has 10 seconds left for false teeth, starting now.
26 of my teeth are real, leaving 2 unreal or false. These are the top one on my left-hand side.
When the whistle goes, that tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that particular point gains an extra point. In this case, it was Clement Freud, who now, at the end of that round, has 3 points, and nobody else has any. Right, Clement Freud, will you begin the next round? Crossing the Channel. Will you try and talk for 60 seconds on that subject, starting now?
This is something which you can do on your own, swimming, or in a canoe, a paddle boat, a ship, a steamer, or even an aeroplane. The common routes are Dunkirk, Calais, Bourgogne, Cherbourg, Dover, Southampton. There's an...
Derek Nimmo, you've challenged. Why?
Hesitation.
I agree, there was a hesitation, so Derek, you get a point and you take over the subject. 41 seconds left. Crossing the channel, starting now.
Well, of course, I've always really wanted to try and cross the channel with the Dardanelles, because I think you might get an awfully interesting hybrid if you achieve that. But apart from that, I think an awfully good way to go across would be in a little rowing boat, and I've got one which is called Snookums, which I keep down at Emsworth, and I have there 2 paddles, and I get into it, and I sometimes row out into the deep blue sea and think to myself...
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
You can't row a canoe. You paddle a canoe.
A very clever challenge of deviation, which I agree with. So, Clement, you have another point. And there are 19 seconds left for crossing the channel, starting now.
I once went on a channel crossing expedition with a rugby supporters club, and it was astonishing to find that this was a very cheap outing, but not a single person on the trip was actually a aficionado of the game of...
Derek Nimmo, you have challenged again. I agree, there was hesitation. Derek Nimmo continues for 2 seconds on crossing the channel, starting now.
Last time I went was in a hovercraft. It was like travelling the M1 in a thunderstorm.
Well, as Derek Nimmo was speaking then when the whistle went, he gains an extra point. And now he is 1 point behind Clement Freud at the end of the second round. Kenneth and Sheila have yet to score, but there is plenty of time yet. Kenneth Williams, will you begin the next round? The subject is enthusiasm, and I'm sure you can expound most thrillingly on that for 60 seconds, starting now.
The word comes to us, as do so many in our language, of course, from Greece, and originally its connotation meant to be possessed by a god. In the 18th...
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Deviation, being possessed by a god.
People often colloquially say they are possessed by something, a god, a devil, or anything, and I think therefore it is not particularly devious, because it's an expression that is frequently used, so I can only say that Kenneth has a point, and he continues with the subject with 47 seconds left. Enthusiasm beginning now.
In the 18th century, it came to signify a lack of control emotionally, and in modern parlance, we understand it to be favoring a person or a cause. People do it about me. They say, oh, we're really enthusiastic
Freud, why
about
have you challenged?
you.
Clement, why have you challenged?
I've forgotten.
He was rather running down.
I remember
wasn't
it
he?
was a good challenge at the time, but
But the look, the withering look that Kenneth gave you, completely dried you up.
it's so early in the programme and I have to go on sitting next to him. You know.
Well, all right, as Clement forgot the challenge, all that happens is that Kenneth has another point and he continues with the subject. 23 seconds left for enthusiasm, starting now.
I frequently find it when they rush to me and cry out, oh, the enthusiasm that you arouse in us is unbelievable. It gives rise to such passions, uncontrollable urges. Yes, when you appear...
Sheila, why have you challenged?
Well, we've got to stop him, haven't we? Deviation.
Why?
Deviate. Well, all this kinky show. All this
Enthusiasm is the subject.
I know, but all these uncontrollable urges that people have got about you. We don't
Have you
know
ever
about
been to a
that.
football match? Have you ever seen enthusiasm at a football match?
Well, that's nothing to do with people having uncontrollable urges about you.
They have such uncontrollable urges, they bash people. That's all that happens.
I must
He's
say...
gone mad. He's gone mad.
No idea.
At last.
Kenneth,
He's gone right off his head.
I must say, Kenneth, that I've never heard a challenge received with such enthusiasm from the audience. And I've never heard anybody speak with less enthusiasm. But as I have to disagree with Sheila's challenge, because it's not within the rules of the game, the subject is still with you. And you have a point and 4 seconds left for enthusiasm, starting now.
Form a fan club, they cry, and let us write to you weekly, have a lock of your hair. Oh, for treasure. To prove of you, they say.
Well, as Kenneth was speaking when the whistle went, then he gains yet another point.
And has leapt into the lead.
And has leapt into the lead. Now, Kenneth, you are showing enthusiasm.
Oh, I'm red hot tonight.
Oh, dear.
I think the audience thought you were a bit tepid on enthusiasm.
Would you like one of my tranquilizers, Ken?
You leapt into the lead alongside Clement Freud.
Ah.
Yes. And I've never heard anybody speak about a subject and yet illustrate at the same time so badly. But there we are. You're still in the lead, Kenneth. Sheila Hancock, your turn to begin. The subject is saving up, and we have now been saving up for Sheila, and it is your turn. 60 seconds, starting now.
This is something that now I am patently bad at, but when I was young, I was very good at it. My father was a very frugal man, and I used to have so much pocket money every week, above which sum he would not allow me to go. When I was very young, it was sixpence, and then I think it was increased to a shilling, all of which I had to work for. And out of that money, I had to save money for Christmas presents and birthday presents. So as soon as I'd saved up for Christmas, I then had to start all over again for birthday. In fact, the whole of my youth was spent saving up, which probably explains why I'm an extremely extravagant person now. If I want something and if I have the money, I get it immediately. And this, I think, is why I will never teach my child to save up. Also, I save up my emotions. If I feel angry with somebody, if I dislike somebody, if I feel spiteful like I do towards Clement Freud, I am saving up for one dirty great scene in which I will tell him exactly what I think of him when he comes in the last few seconds of my thing, which he is waiting with his finger on the buzzer to do now. I will save up the biggest...
I know what you were going to say. I know what you were going to say.
Well, obviously, Sheila has been saving all that up for us for a very long time. That is the first time for quite a long time that somebody has started the subject and finished with it without being interrupted. So Sheila gets a bonus point for speaking so successfully.
Brilliant, brilliant. Oh, good for you, girl. Good.
Derek Nimmo, it is your turn to begin. The subject is giving a short address. Will you speak for just a minute on that, starting now?
Well, of course, it's tremendously advantageous to be able to give a short address. I found this particularly in the first months of my marriage when I lived in a caravan in a yard behind the Metropolitan Theatre in the Edgware Road. Now, when I used to go along to see casting directors and producers and so on, they would say to me, "Where do you live?" And I would say, "I live in the car park in the Edgware Road." And they would say to me...
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Well, we've had the car park.
We've had the car park,
No,
yes.
I said purposely yard, actually.
Yes, he did.
Yes, you're quite right. He said in the yard. Derek Nimmo has another point, and he continues for 40 seconds on giving a short address starting now.
Well, they obviously thought I lived under a bus or something, but it soon became the most sort of famous short address next to Buckingham Palace. And so when people had a job for a policeman or a chap carrying a spear or...
Kenneth Williams, it was a very good try, Kenneth, but Derek Nimmo has another point because I disagree, and there are 30 seconds left for giving a short address starting now.
My lords, ladies, gents, it's very nice to be here today at the opening of your new home. What a lovely tiny home, double time. Sorry, I've said it once.
Home, I quite agree. Clement, you take over the subject of giving a short address. 20 seconds left, starting now.
When I was 19 years old, I was passionate in love.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Deviation, he was never 19 years old.
Well, seeing what the age he looks now, we all have to believe he once was 19, so... bad luck, Derek. All I can say is that Clement has another point, and there are 18 seconds left for giving a short address. Clement, starting now.
With a girl called Phillida Short, and one afternoon I took her down Oxford Street and decided that it was really time that she had a dress. We went in and looked at a number of fashions and different...
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Giving a short address, not giving a short dress.
No.
Well, I think we've established before that you can interpret the words in any way you wish. We can only take it from what you hear. And if it sounds like a short address or a short...
There you are, you see. That's what I'm saying.
I think you're right, Derek. Derek Nimmo has a point, and there are 5 seconds left, giving a short address starting now.
Hello, dear folks. Come round, brethren. Now's the time.
Freud, why have you challenged? Yes, I agree with the hesitation. Clement, there are 2 seconds left for giving a short address starting now.
My Lord Mayor, this is all I'm going to say.
that was all that was necessary to give him yet another point and enhance his lead over Derek at the end of that round. Kenneth begins the next, and the subject is Policewomen. Kenneth, Policewomen starting now.
The subject immediately brings to my mind the picture of an actress who came on dressed as a policewoman and sang about it. And I remember she said, when I draw me truncheon, nobody gets a strike. I'm ever so ladylike, ta-ra-ra. And I used to love to hear that song. Of course, like so much else, things have altered, and nowadays policewomen are not comic at all, and they arouse in us emotions which I would be hard put to it to define, but I will say they are staunch upholders of the morality which we all believe in and want to see upheld. And let me not be gainsaid. Let no...
Clement, Freud, you have challenged.
Too late, yes.
Why do you challenge?
He said I've repeated it.
Well, he hadn't actually repeated it.
When he said I repeated it, I pressed my buzzers. Seemed a natural thing to do.
Well, it doesn't work, then I go on.
Well, this is, I must ask
there with
you.
my hand on the buzzer.
I must accept the first challenge. The challenge, he didn't challenge for hesitation. He challenged for repetition, and he hadn't repeated himself at that point. So Kenneth Williams has another point, and he continues with Policewomen starting now.
How delightful, they look so beautifully tailored. I think that's a tremendous amount, to do with it. They do look nice. And when I've had occasion to actually go out and
So as Kenneth was speaking once again when the whistle went, he gets another point. I must make this point clear that the first challenge that is given must be the one I must accept. And so Kenneth now is catching up on Derek and Clement, who are both still in the lead. Sheila, will you begin the next round? My first boyfriend. 60 seconds starting now.
I'm hard put to remember my first boyfriend, but I think it was when I was at school, at the grammar school.
Derek, why don't you challenge?
A rather injudicious challenge, but hesitation, actually.
Yes, there was a hesitation, yes, but...
Go on, let him have it. I want to know who his first boyfriend was.
53 seconds, Derek, for my first boyfriend starting now.
When I was 5 years old, my first boyfriend's name was Ronald Bell. We used to cycle together on a little tiny tricycle thing. And then we used to have a motor car that we would sit in side by side, which was pushed by my sister, who was only one at the time, which doesn't entirely make sense. But still, that's something I can say. Now he has joined the
Sheila,
Merchant Navy.
Well, it is deviation. If she was one, she couldn't have pushed two hulking great boys on a tricycle. So he's lying. Deviation.
Well, you see, she might have been able to. We don't know. She might have been an Amazonian child, mightn't she?
Was she?
We ought to see her now.
Sheila, I will give you a bonus point for cleverness and leave the subject with Derek Nimmo. 31 seconds for my first boyfriend, Derek, starting now.
He has now joined the Queen's Navy, and he sails out from many harbours, and a gallant chap he is, always at the helm. He's a captain, as a matter of fact, pulling up and down the flag.
Clement, Freud, why do you challenge?
Deviation.
It sounds absolutely devious.
Well, you can't be the captain at the helm pulling out the flag. I mean,
It's a very small boat.
some sense of the demarcation issues of the Navy.
So the demarcation issues of the Navy give Clement Freud another point, and there are 21 seconds left, starting now.
My first boyfriend was called Nicholas Madison and beat me frequently. I used to come out of my dormitory and he stood there, having taken my shoes.
Derek Nimmo, why have you
Well,
challenged?
deviation, if he was a friend and he had these sort of...
You should have seen my enemies.
So, Derek Nimmo has another point. Derek, 11 seconds, my first boyfriend starting now.
Ronnie has a wife now who lives in the Wirral Peninsula, and when he comes home from his trips, he goes to visit her, and I've been to their house.
Kenneth, why do you challenge?
Deviation. He's now talking about his friend's marriage with his wife. The whole point about the subject is my boyfriend.
Yes, quite right.
He is quite right. Quite right. Kenneth won the point.
Actually, has Kenneth won the point?
Yes.
My first boyfriend. Yes. All right, Kenneth, you have the point. There are 4 seconds left for my first boyfriend, starting now.
I met Bryn in Ponnewydd in Wales, and up the mountain we went together.
Well, I tell you, my first boyfriend would have been a lot more interesting than any of theirs.
Well, you never got it out, did you? You never get it out.
Because you're all so rude, you interrupt me all the time.
Yes. Yes, you shout at her sometimes too. At the end of that round, all the chaps' boyfriends have given them points. And so that means that all the chaps are almost equal in the lead. Derek is 1 point ahead of the other 2. Derek, Nimmo, will you begin the next round? The subject is taking notes. 60 seconds starting now.
Now, it's a very odd subject to give anybody taking notes, but if you mean to steal or purloin them, I'm not sure that I entirely approve. But I suppose the best way to go about it is to find somewhere where there is a great deal of paper money. Now, I give all my money to a very old established merchant bank. And when I go, I think that what I would do is to go along and see the manager, Mr. Brunswick, and I would say, meet him there, 10 to 9 in the morning, and say, hello, I've come to see you about my overdraft. I'm so surprised.
Clement, why have you challenged?
Deviation.
Why?
Banks don't open at 10 to 9.
I'm a robber, I'm a baddie. That's why I get there early, to shoot.
I agree with Clement Freud. I think that banks don't open. Derek had not established he was a robber. He doesn't look like a robber. He's never sounded like a robber. And I think that Clement Freud is probably right within the rules of the game, and therefore there are 27 seconds for taking notes. Clement, starting now.
This is something which at all board meetings is done by secretaries or people in similar positions. They do it with pencils and pens, reading what is said from pieces of paper, which are then filed away. Kenneth Williams is looking at me in such a manner that it's very different.
Well, deviation, he wasn't looking at me. He was straight ahead.
No, I'm afraid Derek's absolutely right. Kenneth Williams, I must tell the listeners, was not looking at Clement Freud. So it was deviation. So Derek has another point, and there are 12 seconds left for taking notes, starting now.
In the decoy car waiting outside, I would have Ian Messiter ready with the whistle to blow in case...
Kenneth Williams' wife, you challenge.
Deviation, this has nothing to do with taking notes.
Well, it could be, you see, if he was a robber. To my mind... He's now, in my mind, established that he is a robber, so he'd want a decoy, and he's got Ian Messiter's whistle. Therefore, I agree with Derek. And there are 7 seconds left for Derek to continue with it, starting now.
So I point my revolver in his face, and then I throw pepper at him, and I say, hand over your fivers, give me the £10 that you got hidden behind the till.
Derek's now got a lead of 2 over Kenneth and Clement. And Clement Freud, you begin the next round. The pleasures of hard work. Gosh, I sympathise at a particular moment with that thought. And Clement, will you try and talk for 60 seconds on that subject, starting now?
The pleasures of hard work are strictly limited, but the rewards thereof are considerable. Many people who work 40-hour weeks come home with a flush of realization and receive an amount of affection and love from their nearest and dearest which would make up for all the grime, humiliation, salesmanship, and sheer elbow grease.
Kenneth Williams, your challenge.
I'm sorry, I thought there was going to be a hesitation. It wasn't. I beg your pardon.
No, there was a hesitation.
He just said there was no hesitation. What sort of a chairman are you?
To use a phrase of yours, Kenneth, you are a fool to yourself.
Yes.
I've been trying to play the game very fairly, and you've retracted your challenge, so I must then give it to Clement Freud.
Right.
So Clement has another point. There are 35 seconds left for the pleasures of hard work, starting now.
I knew a woman who lived on the outskirts of Yarmouth, who worked in a pea planting processing factory, where every morning at 7:15 she arrived to sort out from runner beans and...
Kenneth Williams, your challenge.
Deviation could have been doing peas and runner beans.
She did, you establish she worked in a pea factory, so
yes,
I
she had
don't...
to sort out the runner beans to get the peas. I mean...
No, you may be a great gastronome and a great authority and astrology and all these other things, but I think I know the difference between a bean and a pea.
Yes.
And I would not expect to see beans in a pea factory, especially if she was doing the sorting. So Kenneth has a point, and the pleasures of hard work is with you, Kenneth, and there are 21 seconds left, starting now.
I am certainly qualified to discuss this. I think it has a largely therapeutic effect, and when I'm scrubbing down the walls and singing a snatch of one of my favourite refrains, many people say, it's not very often you have to do it. Don't do that.
Well, that, I'm afraid, is all we have time for, and it means we've come to the end of this edition of Just a Minute with a very interesting result. First of all, congratulations to Sheila, because she's undoubtedly the best girl we've ever had on the show. She wasn't given much of a chance this week, but she's absolutely super, and thanks for coming along, and I hope you'll come back, Sheila. Congratulations. You were in 4th place, just. What about you? Clement Freud was in 3rd place, and he was only 1 point behind the winners. And once again we have a draw, and once again Kenneth is joining Derek Nimmo as the winner. Kenneth and Derek. A very keen contest at the end, and I think the chairman suffered most. But anyway, we do hope you've enjoyed this particular edition of Just a Minute. Goodbye from us all. Goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Simon Brett. We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud, and Diane Hart in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much, and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you just heard, we welcome today to represent the ladies for the first time, Diane Hart. I'm sure she's going to do jolly well against these 3 tough exponents of the game. And once more, I'm going to ask them all to try and speak, if they can, for just a minute on some unlikely subject, without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject in any way at all. And according to how well they do this, they will gain points or otherwise. Anyway, let us begin with Clement Freud, and the subject, Clement, is astrology. Can you talk for 60 seconds on that subject, starting now?
Astrology is the knowledge of stars and the belief in signs of the zodiac, of which I don't really approve, because every now and then people come up to me and say, when were you born? And I say the 24th of April, to which they reply, this means you are a Taurus, a bull, boorish, difficult, talented, brilliant, amazing, fantastic, realistic, and I'm afraid...
Diane Hart, you've challenged. Why?
Deviation.
Why?
He isn't.
In this game, I hate to judge on people's personality or character. Sorry, Diane, a very clever try. It means that Clement Freud has a point, and he continues with the subject with 33 seconds left for astrology, starting now.
Most newspapers have a column which is entitled Your Stars, and have a tame astrologer who tells people what is going to happen to them on this day, week, month, or even year. For instance, if you were born under the sign of Geminis, the twins, they predict...
Derek Nimmo, why do you chant?
Repetition, twins.
That's one of those occasions when I definitely award a bonus point for cleverness, but actually within the rules of the game, it doesn't really count. So Clement continues with the subject, and there are 13 seconds left, starting now.
You are likely to meet a tall, dark, bald stranger who is probably wearing a wig and will accost you and promise you great riches and some travel. This is the sort of thing which...
When the whistle goes, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking when the whistle goes gains an extra point. On this occasion, it was Clement Freud He's at this moment being congratulated by the person he sits next to, Kenneth Williams. At the end of that round, Clement has a lead of 1 over all the others. Kenneth Williams, will you begin the second round? The subject is common sense. Can you talk common sense? For just a minute, starting now.
I have more of it than most people, and I think it manifests itself in valuation. Now, for instance, if you are offered something which patently, obviously, is not worth the price, if you have common sense, you reject it. You see.
Derek Nimmo, why are you challenged?
Well, hesitation and deviation.
Hesitation, I agree. Derek, that means you get a point and you take over the subject, and there are 34 seconds left for common sense starting now.
Now, every time I go to Wimbledon Common, I can sense it. Now, how I manage to do this is I stand on the road opposite to the right-hand fork which leads round the 2 ponds behind the fir trees, and I say to myself, there is a smell of conifers in the air. That means...
Kenneth Williams, why have you challenged?
Deviation. We're not talking about common sense.
I think that Derek was making out a very good case for having a sense about a common on which he was walking, and he had a very good sense that he was on Wimbledon Common. I got that picture. I'm sorry you didn't, so all I can say is Derek has another point, and there are 18 seconds left for common sense starting now.
Common sense and plain speaking tend to go hand in glove and mouth to tongue. I do think that this is what this nation needs more of. If there was less blood...
Derek, will you begin the next round for us? The subject is frightening people. 60 seconds starting now.
I suppose the most frightening person I've ever met is Clement Freud. I mean, you just have to look across at him, and that awful grey, matted beard, filled with old bits of soup and carrot, and all down his horrible filthy face. And you can imagine facing a child with a sight like that. I mean, on a Sunday afternoon, straining perhaps across Hampton Court. And then you would see... Yeah, thank you very much.
Deviation, I've never been to Hampton Court.
We've only got your word for it. How do I judge?
I should imagine.
Yes, he imagined him in Hampton Court. So, Derek Nimmo has another point, and there are 36 seconds left for frightening people starting now.
The best way of frightening people round is to put a big sheet over your head.
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Deviation. He said the best way of frightening people. I mean,
he established that you were the best way of frightening someone. All right. To be fair now, as I wasn't sure before, I give you the benefit of the doubt and give you a point, and there are 33 seconds left for frightening people starting now.
Some of the most frightening people I have come across work in the theatre, especially in the musical branch of that profession, where they race after this performance, invariably asking me to give them a lift to the stage door.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Deviation, I've never asked for a lift. He always offers me a lift so he can show off his new car.
To be perfectly fair, Derek, Clement had not established it was you he was giving a lift to, so I must be fair within the rules of the game and say Clement Freud has another point. 17 seconds left for frightening people, starting now.
There's also Derek Nimmo, who I find the most frightening.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Repetition, I'm sure I was mentioned before.
I just said he didn't mention it
No, I
before.
still think he did, Jose.
But still.
Think he did.
Anyway, all that happens is that Clement has another point. Frightening people, Clement, 14 seconds, starting now.
With bristling toupee, loose, false teeth, snapping...
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Absolutely, David, it's real.
I'm not talking about Derek Nimmo. I'm talking about frightening people.
You see, this is the wicked thing of this
Derek Nimmo.
He didn't. He said last time, Derek Nimmo, he started off again in quite a different tack about toupees and frightening people. So I must, within the rules of the game, say Clement has another point, and there are 11 seconds left for frightening people, starting now.
Alsatians, goats, and chipmunks are among animals that frighten people particularly, although I know a woman in Llandudno who is frightened by sheep. Blah.
Well, at the end of that round, as you can well imagine, that Clement Freud has taken a small lead over Derek. I do think Derek's having very bad luck, but the way the game's constructed, I feel I can't do anything else. Diane Hart, will you begin the next round? The subject, very aptly for you, that Ian has chosen is feminists. Will you speak, and I'm sure you can, on that for 60 seconds, starting now?
Well, feminist is a word that men always look at me and say, oh, you're a feminist, in a rather snide way, as though one is proud of it. And after all, why shouldn't one be proud of it? I mean, I can hardly be proud of being a man.
Derek Nimmo, you challenged.
Too much pride.
I'm afraid you do have to get through. 3 times, 45 seconds left for you, Derek, on feminists starting now.
I always think of feminists as those big ladies that wander around in boots, tying themselves to railings, with bowler hats on and smoking pipes. They are the sort of people who always are going up with Mrs. Pangborn. I'm on the wrong station, I think. Oh,
Deviation.
Deviation. Well, just
She never went to the Isle of Wight.
So, Clement, you have a point, and there are 33 seconds left for feminists starting now.
I'm really in favor of feminists because they support women who are the best other sex that we have, and I would like to go along with that very much. There was a movement, I admit, about which my colleague, Mr. Nimmo, was trying unsuccessfully to cast our minds, in which...
Diane, why have you challenged?
Well, he's talking about Derek Nimmo, which is not feminist, I hope.
It's a very clever challenge, Diane, but I think he had established that Derek Nimmo was trying to cast our mind in that direction. I will give you a bonus point for cleverness, Diane, and leave the subject with Clement. Feminists, 7 seconds, starting now.
One of the most audacious attempts to bring this problem to the minds of the public was when a woman ran onto the racecourse at Epsom during the running of the Derby.
That's a very sad note. It did mean that Clement Freud had a point because he was speaking when the whistle went, and he now has a lead of 3 over all the others at the end of that round. Clement, it's your turn to begin the next round, and here's a lovely topical subject. Oh, no. The Loch Ness Monster. Clement, can you talk about the Loch Ness Monster for 60 seconds, starting now?
I got into my small submarine, went down to a depth of 43 feet.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Deviation. Put to the audience whether you've got the small submarine.
I don't need to put it to the audience.
Yes.
But I do believe that he hasn't got a small submarine, so Derek, I definitely award you a point. And
I don't want it.
50 seconds left.
I don't want it.
For the Loch Ness Monster, Derek, starting now.
Well, there are all sorts of theories what really the Loch Ness Monster might be. I would like, of course, to think there really is a monster, and there may well be. A lot of people think it's beavers swimming tail to mouth.
Clement, why do you challenge?
Hesitation.
Hesitation, yes, no, well, so his beaver's tail to mouth causes him to hesitate, and there are 40 seconds left for the Loch Ness Monster, Clement, starting now.
There was recently an American who commissioned a small naval craft which was submerged beneath the water, and in this he attempted to find whether or not such an animal existed.
Kenneth, why do you challenge?
Deviation. The American didn't actually get into it. He arranged for other people to do so.
Kenneth.
The man who did so was an American.
Kenneth, I'm going to say that you have a point for that. And because we haven't heard enough from you about the Loch Ness Monster, and the others are not very keen on the subject, and there are 27 seconds left, starting now.
And this, of course, has never been proved to exist. We are left with some very blurred, dreary old photographs and some very wandering and garbled testimony from people who seem to me to be out of their minds half the time. But there you are. Mythology, of course, springs up around strange incidents. And recently, when somebody's chimney caught the light next to me...
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Well, Deviation, you're talking about somebody's chimney that caught the light. A long way from Scotland.
Yes, I think that chimney was a bit far from the old monster, don't you? I think it would have very soon gone out, too, if it had been smoking. Derek, I give you a point and 1 second left for the Loch Ness Monster, starting now.
In the Book of Revolution.
As you can see, once again, if you're clever enough to get in just before the 60 seconds is up, you can always get an extra point. Derek has got 2 more, but he's still 1 behind Clement Freud, who is still in the lead. Kenneth Williams, will you begin the next round? Something that I know you can talk about extraordinarily well, Kenneth. The finest human qualities. will you talk to us about that for 60 seconds starting now?
I can talk about them because I possess them. I would say the finest in the listing would have to be altruism. I think I am one of the most altruistic.
Clement Freud is challenged. Why?
No, I said altruism, and the second was altruistic.
Yes, he did.
Why don't you listen?
You didn't get it.
Actually, I'll tell you, Kenneth, he was listening so well, he anticipated the challenge, and he challenged you on altru.
Yes, that's
He
right.
didn't get the
You
tistic
see,
up,
that's
yeah.
right, what you said, Nick. You're right.
yes.
Don't mind me saying Nick.
What you said? You're liable to say anything at any time, so suddenly to apologise for saying Nick.
Well, I mean, the shortened version is a bit impertinent. One should say Nicholas, of course.
There are 45 seconds left for altru... No, they're not. 45 seconds left for the finest human qualities starting now.
Then we would have to come to truth and goodness and beauty. Of course, I have all these three. It's an abundance, or as some people would say, the embarrassment of riches.
Deviation,
You see, I'm embarrassed by my own riches, don't see. I see he's hanging on my word.
Yes, one person was hanging on your words, but we're all waiting to find out what Derek's challenge was, actually.
Well, I wouldn't deviate. I wouldn't dispute goodness and beauty, but I would dispute truth. I think he is not truthful.
So you think
A little fibber.
that while you agree that Kenneth has many qualities and he has some in abundance, he hasn't got truth in abundance.
No.
He's proved in this game because we have to be very untruthful sometimes at playing this game. So it's a very clever challenge, Derek. I give you a point and 33 seconds left for the finest human qualities starting now.
Of course, I think, really, this is one of the subjects which one shouldn't treat too lightly. It's so easy to...
Diane Hart, why did you challenge?
Hesitation.
Yes, he'd got so slow he had almost hesitated, hadn't he?
Yes, I think so.
Playing the game a bit too sharply once more. So, Diane, you have a point, and you have 27 seconds for the finest human qualities starting now.
Well, I don't think I've ever met anybody with the finest human qualities. And the way Clay Freud is looking at me from over there, I don't think I'll live long enough.
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Deviations.
Why?
Got nothing to do with finest human qualities.
You haven't got anything
The way
to do
I'm
with the
look-
finest human
The way I'm looking at her has got nothing to do with fine human qualities.
It might have.
Well, you're so sexy, it put me off.
Oh, well, in that case, yes.
I was going, before Diane came out, I was going to say that she had actually endowed Clement with different human qualities, because we do believe he has some. So, Diane, you have a point, and you have 17 seconds left for the finest human qualities starting now.
But I live in hopes that one day I shall meet a gorgeous man who's tall and beautiful and...
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Hesitation.
Hesitation, yes, there was. She got stuck on this chap. She got this image in her mind and couldn't go any further.
Quite right.
Derek, you have another point and 9 seconds left for the finest human qualities starting now.
Finest human qualities set out very clearly in St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13, when he says, "Though I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, and I have not love..."
The words of St. Paul there, quoted by Derek, means that as the whistle went, he gets another point, and he now has a lead of 2 at the end of that round. Over all the others, of course. Derek, will you begin the next round, keeping the peace? This is a subject I should talk about for 60 seconds, really, isn't it? Anyway, Derek, will you try, starting now?
Curious that you would ask me to speak about keeping the peace, because it reminds me of something which I'm not terribly proud of. A few months ago, I was staying at a house in Lincolnshire, and after dinner one evening, we sat down to play a game of chess. And I started off with an interesting game,
Cleanne, why have you challenged?
Repetition, he started off twice.
Yes, he did. Yes.
True.
Yes, he never got going a score, did he? 43 seconds for you, Diane, on the subject of keeping the peace, starting now.
Well, there is a piece which people keep, which I think is absolutely disgusting. And somebody I know had a child who had one of these, and she called it a sucky blanket, which apparently the child wouldn't go to bed without Bah!
Derek, you're challenged. Right. Hesitation. Diane, you've got to keep going, even, the risk of repeating yourself, because otherwise you get had for hesitation. Derek, you have another point, and 23 seconds for keeping the peace, starting now.
The chessmen were of the finest ivory construction, inlaid with gold and mother of pearl. They had come from India, been brought by my friend's grandfather some little time before. When we started this interesting game, the funny thing happened was that I said check, and therefore I was able to take his queen's bishop.
Kenneth and his wife, your challenge.
But it's totally devious. Nothing to do with keeping the peace.
Right then.
What happened was that I took the bishop, I put it into my pocket by mistake, and kept the peace.
Yeah, but you've taken such a long time to...
I'm telling you the story.
Yeah, but it took you so long to get there. It was utterly devious on the way. So Kenneth has another point, and there are 3 seconds left for keeping the peace. Kenneth, starting now.
It is the duty, of course, of the police to keep the peace, and a marvellous job they do.
Well, as Kenneth was speaking when the whistle went, then he gains an extra point, and he's now in 3rd place behind the other 2. Derek is still leading. Diane, will you begin the next round? The subject is serendipity. Can you talk on that strange subject for 60 seconds, starting now?
I don't think I can talk about it at all, frankly. I think, as far as I remember, it's discovering something by accident and being very happy about it. Well, once I had a baby. That's not what was the serendipity about it. But I was offered a play, and I said to the specialist, may I go and rehearse next week? And he said, no, of course you can't. I mean, he's just had this baby. So I said, well, I can't pay you.
Clement, why have you challenged? Hesitation. Alas, there was. Yes, it was a repetition of the baby, too.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway. And those who know that Diane has actually repeated that process. She has 2 children. But anyway.
That was serendipity.
Well said, Diane, well said. 30 seconds. Clement has another point. 30 seconds left for serendipity. Clement, starting now.
Serendipity is a quality which I have in abundance. You only have to see my family, my aunts and uncles, my loving mother, and my well-intentioned father who used to beat me unmercifully when I was small. And
Diane, why do you challenge?
Not serendipity if he was beating him.
No, it wasn't. No. Indeed, no.
I'm a masochist.
Ah. Well, yes,
and we've already established those wonderful human qualities that you had earlier on, so you can't be a masochist and have wonderful human qualities. So Diane has another point, and there are 14 seconds left for serendipity, starting now.
So anyway, this specialist let me go to work, but my tummy stuck out.
Clement, why have you challenged?
Hesitation.
Hesitation, unless your tummy was hesitating you. There are 10 seconds left for you, Clement, on serendipity, starting now.
3 of us running down a beach in Suffolk one summer.
Derek, Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Repetition, 3 of them.
I think that's one occasion, and the audience agree, where I give a bonus point for cleverness. Leave the subject with Clement. 8 seconds left. Serendipity, starting now.
And the sun shone, and a circus had moved into the nearest town, and the £10 note stuck on the roundabout.
In spite of that, Derek, you still have a lead at the end of that round. It's only 1, but Kenneth Williams, your turn to begin again. Having a field day. You have one regularly in this show, Kenneth, so think about that thought and talk for 60 seconds on it, starting now.
Well, of course, one's mind automatically connects with fields when the expression is used, and I have done 1 or 2 things in fields, but none of which I would really recount with very much zest. On the other hand, camping has figured largely in my activities. And I remember when we had to do these outside latrines and erect mesh things all round, you see, so that people could do it without undue prodigality, as they say. And there we were, and the scouts...
Clement Freud challenged.
Hesitating.
Yes, it's a full stop. Clement, you now take over the subject with 21 seconds left for having a field day, starting now.
This is really one of my favorite ways of spending an afternoon. I run around touching a leg here, gripping an arm there, embracing a woman, perhaps...
Kenneth,
deviation's a load of filth, isn't it? Around feeling ladies' legs, lovely.
But that's the subject.
What?
Field day, feeling
That's
people's
right.
legs.
Field day.
The idea of you, Clement, running around touching a
field
leg.
day.
Well, I haven't come along yet to listen to things like that.
So at the end, having had all that touching, you say, I've really melted today. So what do we
That's
do?
what I call
It's a
a field
very
day.
clever interpretation of the word, isn't it? I have to play the
told you he
game.
was
So
sexy.
Clement Freud has another point, and 6 seconds for having a field day starting now.
With my hand stroking the small of her back.
Oh.
And her hand touching...
Derek Nimmo, why?
Program is absolutely disgusting. You can't let him go on stroking small back.
Absolutely agree, Derek.
Filth up and down the legs and everywhere he's been.
We cannot let him go on any longer. All right. We
Well,
can't let
can
him
I
go-
go and sit beside him then?
No, you can't. He's already booked.
He's already got Kenneth Williams beside him. Please do. We can't go on any further with
No,
Clement
we can't.
Freud's feeling days. So, we have 1 second left for you, Derek, on having a field day starting now.
Having a field day.
We, alas, have come to the end of Just a Minute. It's alas because perhaps we should have finished on a rather more note of better tone. But let me tell you the result. Diane Hart was just in 4th place, just behind Kenneth Williams was in 3rd place. Derek Nimmo was way ahead of them both in 2nd place. And Clement Freud's activities in that field, which we do not wish to dwell any further upon, gave him a lead at the end of the last round and makes him the winner this week. Clement Freud. We do hope the audience here, in the nicest sense of the word, have a field day. And we hope the listeners may have had a field day listening to the show. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The program was devised by Ian Messeder and produced by Simon Brett. We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud, and Aimi MacDonald in Just a Minute. And as the minute was fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we welcome back Aimi MacDonald to play the game, looking lovely amongst these 3 awful men. And once again, I'm going to ask them to try and speak, if they can, for 60 seconds on some unlikely subject that I will give them, without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject in any way at all. If one of their opponents thinks they're guilty of doing this, they may challenge and they will gain points or give points away according to whether I uphold their challenge. Let us begin with Kenneth Williams. I'm sure you've got a lot to say for yourself,
Oh, I'm
Kenneth.
raring to go, yeah.
Well, can you go on Oliver Cromwell?
Oliver Cromwell?
Yes, that is the subject, Kenneth. Oliver Cromwell, 60 seconds, starting now.
He was a disgusting old man and, of course, a regicide, and was wont to use such expressions as, I do beseech thee from my bowels, which, of course, is quite unnecessary, and put to the sword women and children over 5,000 at Armagh, was responsible for the desecration of some of the loveliest of our ecclesiastical buildings, and had the doubtful honour of having his body disinterred.
Derek Nimmo, you've challenged. Why?
Deviation. I mean, hesitation, sorry.
I don't think he hesitated, and you did say deviation first. So all that happens is I don't agree with the challenge. Kenneth gains a point, and he goes on with Oliver Cromwell for 32 seconds, starting now.
And they dug him up and hung him at Tyburn, and quite right, too, that's what I say. Not very often we've had his kind in this country. He called himself Lord Protector, and, of course, he was just adding what they nowadays would describe.
Clement Freud, you challenge. Why?
Hesitation.
Yes, I agree with the hesitation there. Clement, you take over the subject. There are 17 seconds left for Oliver Cromwell, starting now.
If I had served my God with half the zeal with which I served my king, he would not.
Kenneth Williams, you challenge. Why?
Because these are not the words of Oliver Cromwell at all.
I quite agree.
Didn't say they were.
I know you haven't said they were, but the thing is you have said it, and the subject is Oliver Cromwell, so we can only assume that you're referring to Oliver Cromwell. So in the circumstances, I have to give Kenneth Williams another point and say there are 10 seconds left for Oliver Cromwell starting now.
Yes, you could describe it as a military government. It was largely financed by a man called Sir John Hampden, who was his sidekick, another evil man, of course. Absolute regicides, all of them.
Well, as Kenneth Williams was speaking when the whistle went, and that tells us that 60 seconds is up, he gets an extra point. And it means at the end of the first round, he has a commanding lead of 3 over Clement Freud's 1, and the others have yet to score. It is obvious that Kenneth's knowledge of history puts him into this position. All right, let's continue with the show. Aimi MacDonald, will you begin the second round? My favourite springtime activity. Can you talk in front of these 3 fellows here about that for 60 seconds starting now?
Well, every morning I allot myself 10 minutes for exercises.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Well, deviation, because if it's every morning, it can't be springtime.
That is an extraordinary clever challenge. I will give you a bonus point for cleverness, but as Aimi does not play the game as often as you, I will leave the subject with her and tell her there are 49 seconds left for my favourite springtime activity starting now.
So, I think the best way to exercise, you see, is to spring up and down. So I bought myself a trampoline, and I get my trampoline out every morning, and
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Regrettably, repetition of trampoline.
Me.
Yes, she did repeat her trampoline more than once, alas. So, Derek, I agree you take a point this time, and the subject over. 41 seconds left. My favourite springtime activity starting now.
My favourite springtime activity is Aimi MacDonald. Nothing I can imagine more beautiful on an April morning than to stroll through Regent Park, holding her close to me for a little occasional activity beside...
Clement Freud, why?
Deviation.
Why?
You can't stroll holding someone close. You can stagger.
You've never seen Derek Nimmo at his best, obviously. I will give you a bonus point for cleverness, Clement, but leave the subject with Derek, because we don't know how he manages to get through Regent's Park, or any park, with this particular activity. 28 seconds left, Derek, to continue starting now.
I said to Aimi, would you mind?
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Repetition, he's already said, Aimi.
Yes.
That is the subject on the card.
No. It's the subject on your card, you're quite right. Clement Freud, you have another point, and you have 23 seconds left for my favourite springtime activity starting now.
My favourite springtime activity is Kenneth Williams. There's no better time of year.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Deviation.
The audience entirely agree.
You've hurt him.
You've hurt me. You've wounded me, Nicholas. That's very wounding.
It wasn't. It was the audience.
Oh, that is wounding, isn't it?
I don't know what you and Kenneth do in the springtime, but it sounds utterly devious. And I think this moral-minded audience considers it devious, so I can only give Derek a point and say there are 15 seconds left for the subject, Derek, beginning now.
And I quote to her those wonderful words of that marvellous man, Oliver Cromwell. He said...
Aimi MacDonald, you challenge.
Deviation is talking about Oliver Cromwell again.
Well, he was actually quoting the words.
To Aimi MacDonald, who is my favourite springtime
You see?
activity.
And he's only quoting here, Aimi, so it's a very clever try, but alas, it means that Derek has another point and 10 seconds left to continue with his favourite springtime activity starting now.
Who said, no man goes so high as he who knows not where he's going, which always proves the extreme modesty of the man. And
Kenneth Williams, why have you
I
challenged?
can't let that pass. I mean, he's attributing modesty to Oliver Cromwell. That's deviation. The man was a conceited old faggot.
History can only report these things, and your interpretation of Cromwell is one, others may have another. I will put this one to the audience to decide whether they agree on your judgment of Oliver Cromwell. If you agree with Kenneth Williams' judgment on Cromwell, cheer. If you disagree, boo, and do it together now.
Yes, I think the cheers have it.
Kenneth Williams gets a point, and the subject of my favourite springtime activity. 3 seconds left, starting now.
Running barefoot through the grass, smelling the dew in the morning. What?
As Kenneth Williams is speaking once again, when the whistle went, he gains that extra point, and he still keeps the lead. 1 in front of Derek Nimmo, who is 1 in front of Clement Freud. Derek, will you begin the next round? The subject is good plots. Will you speak for just a minute on that, starting now?
Good plots are not necessarily good because they're successful. I mean, an arch monarchist like Kenneth Williams, for instance, might think the deeds of Charles I wholly admirable when, spurred on by that awful wife of his, Henrietta Maria, he went down to the House of Commons to arrest his 5 arch enemies, Hampden, Hollis, Pym, Hampton, and that awful man Strode. But there had been a counterplot against them, and this had been from a lady in the Queen's bedchamber who had warned them to fly, and guarded by the men of the City of London, they disappeared. Well, this is what a man like Kenneth Williams would consider to be a good plot.
Clement Freud, you challenge. Why?
The repetition of Kenneth Williams.
Yes. There was a repetition, and though we all feel we can't have too much of Kenneth Williams, in just a minute you can, and you have 25 seconds left for good plots, starting now.
Gabriella Isabel, Archduchess of the Austro-Romanian Empire, padded silently along the 3rd floor of the palace towards the bedchamber.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Well, he's not talking about good plots.
Well, I think from the way he was talking, this was a very good historical plot. It's only very sinister, and although it wasn't firmly established, it was working up to...
Working up to it, he was, you could tell, yes. I was throbbing in empathy.
I think you better keep quiet about your springtime activity.
Dear. Sorry, dear. Sorry, Nicholas, dear.
Look, you don't call me dear and Clement Freud as well.
No, sorry.
That's right. There are Clement Freud has another point, and there are 13 seconds left for good plots, starting now.
Opening the door of Prince Francis' bedchamber, she took...
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Repetition of bedchamber.
Yes, you did say bedchamber. There are 9 seconds. Derek Nimmo, good plots, starting now.
Some of the best plots are to be found in the cemetery called Forest Lawn in California. They are very expensive, but if you enroll for one at an early age...
Clement Freud...
Hesitation.
There are 3 seconds left for good plots, Clement, starting now.
Take this, you swine, she said.
At the end of that round, Clement was speaking when the whistle went, so he now has a small lead of 2 over the others. Kenneth, will you begin the next round for us? The subject is the ballet. Will you talk on that without demonstrating, we hope, for 60 seconds starting now?
This is where you get your entrechat, meaning, of course, your opening chat, and, of course, your balletto
Aimi,
names.
why have you challenged?
Lies. Well, deviation.
Deviation, why?
Well, entrechat doesn't mean opening chat.
Of course it doesn't mean opening chat. You're quite right. As a dancer, we must bow to you on this, Aimi. So I give you the subject. 52 seconds left for the ballet, starting now.
Well, the ballet is a beautiful thing, and I love to go and watch it, actually. I sit there getting quite entranced by the whole thing and carrying myself off into the distance, thinking about...
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Deviation.
Why?
Carrying myself off into the distance.
That's really impossible, isn't it?
How do you?
Yes, she sits there talking a load of rubbish.
Yes, well, as you cannot physically carry yourself off into the distance, it is a devious thought. I give Clement a bonus point for a clever challenge. Leave the subject with Aimi.
Yes,
37 seconds left for the ballet, starting now.
And I watch people flitting across the stage with effortless grace. The only thing it does do to me, which isn't really very adorable...
Kenneth, why have you challenged?
Deviation, we're not discussing what it does to her, because the subject is ballet.
Well, she's still talking
I'm
about
still
the ballet,
talking
and
about
she's describing this particular...
She's already said she carried herself off with all her emotions on the subject. We all know she
It has such a... The ballet has such an impact on her that obviously there's more than one
She's
emotion.
a deviator, and you know it. Why don't you come out in the open and admit it?
I'm not going to admit my personal relations with Aimi MacDonald on this program. No, I think she's still on the subject of the ballet, and she has 26 seconds for it, starting now.
The only thing it does do is make me cry. And this I find really not very lovely, because I make an awful lot of noise when I cry.
Kenneth, why have you challenged?
We're still on personal reaction. We're not on the ballet at all.
No, but she's also said...
I'm watching the ballet. This is all happening when I'm watching it, you see.
Oh, it's ludicrous. I mean, you could say that about any subject.
I know you can take any subject and treat it in exactly the same way that Aimi is doing it. You could have had her for crying. She said cried twice.
Yes,
But-
that's what I meant. Do you remember? That's the bit I meant. Yes, repetition.
Aimi MacDonald has another point, and there are 17 seconds left for the ballet. Aimi, starting now.
My favorite ballerina was Ulanova. I saw her dance Giselle when I was very, very young. And it had...
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Repetition, very, very.
Yes, very, very young, yeah, that's right. Yes.
I think it's very ungallant if
Terribly
you want
ungallant,
to
but
stress
typical,
something,
if I
as
may
we
say.
haven't usually had this.
Not unexpected.
She was not only very young, she was very, very young,
Yes,
which
that's
describes a
different.
different state of youth.
Rubbish, it's still repetition. What are you talking about? You partisan.
Amy MacDonald is so young-looking, she would have to say very, very to establish how young she was.
It's
when she
obvious
saw
you're
she
in
was-
cahoots with her. Easy. Isn't he? How did she get on the show in the first place? She's slipping him the chase.
She danced her way on, didn't you?
Oh, I
Amy, 9 seconds left for the ballet, starting now.
The part that sticks in my
Clement
mind
Freud, why have you
particularly...
challenged?
Hesitation.
Yes, this time I must agree.
Hesitation.
No.
Oh!
No, just
I must say, in giving this decision, I gave the benefit of the doubt to Amy last time because I haven't usually upheld a very, very before. But this time I think there was hesitation, so to be quite fair, I give it to Clement Freud. Another point, 8 seconds left for the ballet, Clement, starting now.
When I was only fairly young, I went to see Coppelia at Covent Garden, and a more beautiful creation I have yet to encounter. The fairies...
Well, as Clement Freud was speaking when the whistle went, then he gets that extra point, and it means now that he is exactly equal alongside Derek Nimmo. And Amy MacDonald has scored quite a few points. She's danced her way up from the back alongside Kenneth Williams in the second place. Amy, your turn to begin. We're going to hear your voice again, Amy. How lovely. Can you dance this one for us too? The subject is What Thrills Me? 60 seconds, starting now.
Well, lots of things thrill me, actually.
That was very gallant.
That was very gallant, that was, wasn't it? Yes, he's a gent, he is, isn't he? Oh, great gent.
Will you keep quiet? Derek Nimmo, you got in there first. What?
hesitation,
Yes,
I'm awfully ashamed to say. Yes.
Hesitation was going to be drier. Well, Amy, I'm fascinated to know what the biggest of all must be because it completely stopped you in your tracks. 55 seconds left, Derek, for What Thrills Me, starting now.
One of the things that rarely thrill me is being on a programme like this with such exciting people like Kenneth Williams, who's always good for a giggle. And old Clement Freud over there. And there Ian Ness, who never says a word, but stands there holding his watch and blowing his whistle. And dear Nicholas Parsons, that wonderful example of clean-limbed English middle-aged youth. But of course, the most exciting thing of all is the lovely, the beautiful, the absolutely magnificent Amy MacDonald, who sits beside me covered in jewels with blonde hair, looking like Aphrodite rising from the sea off the coast of Paphos in Cyprus. I feel like a fisherman watching this wondrous nymph rising into the air, and I think, oh my God.
An extraordinary, well-deserved 2 points. And
Flattery gets you somewhere.
One for getting in, one for when the whistle went, and none of us dared have challenged him when he was paying such nice and rude compliments to us all. Derek, I'm going to ask you to continue talking because it's your turn to go again. The subject is Turning Turtle. 60 seconds, starting now.
Well, I turned turtle only once, and it was a most alarming experience. The first thing I knew about it was when a piece of hard skin appeared on the small of my back. I first thought it was a wart, but I went along to my doctor. By this time it had grown to the size of a large toadstool. The surgeon said, "You are turning into a turtle." I said, "I'm very..."
Amy MacDonald, why have you challenged?
Because nobody would tell him he was turning into a turtle.
I quite
That's
agree. He could not
ridiculous.
possibly turn into a turtle. So, Amy, you have 37 seconds for Turning Turtle, starting now.
I was walking through my garden one day. The trees were all in bloom and the birds were singing. And
Derek Nimmo, why have you
The
challenged?
deviation has not got to do anything with
I
anything very
haven't
much.
got to the turtle yet.
I could believe she could turn turtle walking through a garden with the trees all in bloom. Amy, you have another point. 31 seconds left for Turning Turtle, starting now.
As I was looking at my feet and kicking my way along the paths, I suddenly came across a very strange object. Whereupon I looked at this thing and thought to myself, oh, a turtle, I thought.
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Deviation, if she knew it was a turtle, it wasn't strange.
It was obviously very strange for Amy to see a turtle in her garden. I don't think she finds turtles in her garden regularly, and so I believe that it was a strange experience for her, and so she has 16 seconds for turning turtle starting now.
I only thought it was a turtle.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Well, you see, repetition of turtle. We've had too many turtles.
We've had too many turtles, yes. So, Derek, you have 13 seconds for turning turtle starting now.
Out in Chichester Harbour I sailed in my little dinghy. It's called a heron. And there the most extraordinary thing happened to me. A wind blew up a 5-7 gale, and over I went into the slush.
Amy, why have you challenged?
Deviation, he hasn't mentioned anything about turtles. He's talking about boats and winds and...
I know, but he was just going to say he turned turtle in his boat, you see. So, Derek has another point with 4 seconds left, turning turtle starting now.
And as the chairman said, I then turned turtle into the sea.
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Repetition, you've just said that.
Yes, I've just said that.
But I haven't.
We've had far too many turning turtles already, I think. So Clement Freud has another point, and 2 seconds left, starting now.
Come into the garden more.
I would like to establish that I think Clement got that extra point very, very justifiably at the end. And he's now 3 points behind Derek, who's still in the lead. And we continue with Clement Freud, and the subject is school plays starting now.
When I played the part of Antony, Cleopatra was performed by a boy called Pontefract Jr. And this was slightly difficult because he was in a lower form than I and had halitosis.
Amy, why have you challenged?
Hesitation.
Oh, I don't think so, Amy. No, he's going rather slowly. He didn't actually hesitate, no. So, 46 seconds left for school plays, Clement, starting now.
And Pontefract came on...
Derek, why have you challenged?
Repetition of Pontefract.
No,
Yes,
Pontefract
Derek?
Minor. This was Pontefract.
There's a still...
Well, then you should have said
Completely
Pontefract
different boy.
Senior.
Different boy.
It might be a different boy, but you repeated Pontefract. Derek Nimmo has a point, and there are 44 seconds left for school plays, starting now.
There is a play that I've always wanted to appear in, but my son appeared in it first. This is a play called The Scarlet Pimpernel, and I went to see him play Sir Percy Blakeney.
Amy
Now,
MacDonald.
that was definitely hesitation.
Well, all right, you don't need to...
Of course it was.
I quite
Absolutely
agree,
right.
yes,
It's right.
You have a
Very
point,
good.
and you have 32 seconds left for school plays, Amy, starting now.
In my first school play, I played a bush. It was in Macbeth, and my part of the whole thing was to stand behind a bush. Oh,
Derek, now-
repetition!
Of Bush.
Oh, bush, yes. I'd also thought being devious. If you were a bush, how could you also stand behind it? So anyway, Derek, you have 21 seconds left for school plays, starting now.
In my very first school play, I played a mushroom. And if you ever played one, you have to wear a very big straw hat. And then you're covered from head to foot in brown stockingette. Then I had on some slippers. Now, unfortunately, I came on without one of my slippers, and I got a laugh.
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Repetition of slippers.
Yes, there are
Oh,
6
what a
seconds
sad-
left for you, Clement, on school plays, starting
It's a
now.
lovely story.
And then he
It was most
said, oh, that we now had
charming.
here
Delightful
but
story.
1/10,000 of those men in England that do no work today.
A very exciting situation. Clement Freud is creeping out fast on Derek Nimmo. He's now only 2 points behind him. Amy is only trailing a little behind that, and Kenneth is a little bit behind Amy. Kenneth, will you begin the next round? My other self. Can you tell us all about it in 60 seconds, starting now?
I can only assume this refers to my better self, or as my cousins in Germany put it, mein besseres Ich. Ah, what flotations this arouses. Oh, how delighted I feel in turning, so to speak, the spot.
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
Absolute revulsion. The thought of there being another self remotely like Kenneth Williams. Deviation, repetition if there are two, and hesitation because it fills me with such horror.
How
Williams has
blows he rains upon me.
Yes, and Kenneth Williams has another point. I disagree entirely. 39 seconds left for my other self, Kenneth, starting now.
It would be said properly that it dwells, so to speak, upon an intellectual plane. place where I...
Derek Nimmo, why have you challenged?
A nervous thumb. I mean, I didn't mean to.
Kenneth Williams, you have another point, and there are 28 seconds left for my other self, starting now.
A level of fancy upon which I can soar to heights which know no limitations in the physical world. I can become the principal dancer in the Spectre in a rose, have the petals falling all over them.
Aimi MacDonald, why have you challenged?
Well, deviation, because he's talking about his other self, but if he put his mind to it, he could do it all that as himself now.
I could do the Spectre that I rose. You must be mad. She'd start raving.
Or something like that.
I think it's a very clever challenge, Aimi, yes. I must explain to the listeners that Kenneth's about to get up and he's just given us a very good example of how he does the Spectre de la Rose, so obviously Aimi must have a point. So she takes over the subject. And there are 14 seconds left, Aimi, for my other self, starting now.
My other...
Clement Freud challenged. Why? Hesitation.
I'm only breathing.
No, it's not good enough, dear. I'm sorry. It's not good enough.
So, Clement, you take over the subject. 13 seconds for my other self, starting now.
It's an astonishing thing, but every time I look into a mirror, there it is. I lift my arm.
Derek, why have you challenged?
That's not his other self-deviation, that's his reflection.
It is very clever challenge, I quite agree, Derek. There are 7 seconds left for my other self, starting now.
Being a schizophrenic, I must tell you about the troubles with my other self. I went to see my psychiatrist the other day.
Derek's thwarted revelation there means that he takes the extra point when the whistle went, and it also, unfortunately, is the end of this particular edition of Just a Minute. So I must give you the final score. Kenneth Williams was only just in 4th place, about 2 points behind Aimi MacDonald. Aimi was a few points behind Clement Freud, who was in 2nd place, but by a clear 3-point lead was this week's winner, Derek Nimmo. We do hope you've enjoyed this particular edition of Just a Minute, and from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Simon Brett. We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud, and Geraldine Jones in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we are delighted to welcome back Geraldine Jones to our program, looking extraordinarily pretty, I must tell the listeners. I'm going to ask all four of them to try and speak for just a minute on some unlikely subject without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject in any way at all. If one of their opponents thinks they're guilty, they may challenge them, and if I uphold their challenge, they'll gain a point, and if I don't, the point will go to every speaking. Kenneth Williams, will you begin? The subject is Constantinople. Can you talk about that for 60 seconds starting now?
Oh, the glorious natural sight as the ship comes into the harbour of the minarets and the turrets and the great dome of San Sofia. Oh, the joy that I...
No, nothing. Clement, you've challenged. Yes, there was hesitation, but something put you off, Kenneth.
Yeah, I said oh twice, I suddenly realised.
Oh, I see. I thought you were prepared. Right, so, Clement, there was hesitation, you get a point, and there are 37 seconds for Constantinople starting now.
If you go to the city of Istanbul, many people will remember when that same place was called Constantinople. And there are those who have lived in one town and moved to the other without ever leaving their own house. This is a...
Geraldine Jones, why have you challenged?
Hesitation.
Yes, there was. He was so overcome with his cleverness. Because all the audience said, oh, isn't that brilliant, they thought to themselves.
Oh, I thought he was a groan of boredom.
No, it wasn't. They were deeply impressed with you. They've all become your fans, Clement. So there are 21 seconds left, because Geraldine now gets a point and takes over the subject, Constantinople, starting now.
My first acquaintance with this word was, like many others, as a small child when some fool came up to me and said, Constantinople's a very hard word, spell it. And of course I, being an extremely precocious child, had absolutely no difficulty at all.
Clement Freud, why do you challenge?
Repetition of child.
Yes, alas, you did bring your childhood in more than once. So, Clement, you get another point and 9 seconds for Constantinople starting now.
In this gay city of wide streets.
Derek Nimmo, why do you challenge?
Repetition of city.
Yes, because he talked about the city of Constantinople and Istanbul. So, Derek, you gain another point, and there are 7 seconds left for Constantinople starting.
And I went to this jeweller's shop, and he produced a very nice blue-green...
Kenneth Williams, why do you challenge?
A jeweller's shop has nothing to do with Constantinople.
Can I justify?
But it might well be in Constantinople. You must give him a chance to finish his sentence, Kenneth. So all that happens is that Derek gets a point.
Well, I'd like to hear this justification.
Well, all right. Quickly, Derek.
Why, do I do it within my time? Or...
No, you just say, finish your sentence.
Well, I went to the jeweller's shop, and he produced a lovely bluey green stone for me. I said, I can't stand an opal, I'd much rather have her.
Satisfied, Kenneth?
Yes, it's very good.
Yeah.
I'd have got to the end of my 9 seconds.
Well, I think the only fair thing to say, I thought it was going to be half a sentence, but you would have taken 5 seconds at least to say that, so I decide this point.
Well done. Now.
Derek Nimmo, will you begin the next round with the subject of tall stories? 60 seconds starting now.
A tall story is one which is supposed to be true, but is probably apocryphal.
Geraldine Jones, you've challenged. Why?
Deviation. I don't believe there's a word of, well, what he said. He meant to say apocryphal. But he
and what did he say?
Apocryphal.
Did I really?
Yes. Oh, that's very sharp of you.
Yes. Geraldine, you gain a point, because I agree with your challenge. There are 55 seconds left for tall stories starting now.
The best tall stories are, of course, those that you don't realise are tall.
Derek Nimmo, you challenge. Hesitation, I quite agree. Derek, you've got straight back. You get a point. You have 50 seconds for tall stories starting now.
A yarn that was told to me, which is supposed to be true, is of a nun, a Sister of Mercy, riding in a jeep in the Libyan desert when she ran out of petrol. She walked to a nearby oasis.
Clement, why have you challenged?
Deviation. It wasn't the nun who ran out of petrol, it was the jeep.
Clement Freud, you take a point for that, and there are 40 seconds left for tall stories starting now.
Hans Andersen wrote one which was placed in a balloon, and as it passed a garden populated by children, one said, "Oh, look, it is 3 feet up," and the other said, "More like 6 inches. 7 meters, replied another. No, 8 miles. 9...
Geraldine Jones, why have you challenged?
Well, this may be one tall story, but it's not really about tall stories in general.
Hans Andersen wrote tall stories in general.
But you dwelt on one tall story for quite a considerable time.
They were all at different heights.
Oh, they were all different heights. Very clever, Clement Freud. I'm sorry, you've made your point. I quite agree. You take a point. And there are 24 seconds left for tall stories starting now.
A furlong up was yet another.
Derek Nimmo, why do you challenge?
Repetition of measurements.
That is a clever idea, and I've not allowed it before because you can have a repetition of ifs, a repetition of ands, a repetition of any quantities of things. So all I will say is that I'm not going to give any points for that and say there are 21 seconds for tall stories, Clement, starting now.
Was another volume of stories, tall and beautiful, amongst which the princess and the monk was perhaps the most beautiful. These two...
Derek Nimmo, why do you challenge?
Repetition of beautiful.
Yes, indeed, that's right. Derek, you take over the subject, and gaining another point, of course. 10 seconds left. Tall stories starting now.
So she obtained a gallon of gasoline, but the only thing she could carry back in was a child's potty. But when she got back, she was just pouring it into the tank of the aforesaid car. A great big Cadillac stopped nearby.
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Hesitation.
Well, yes, he was trying to get the story out
in 10 seconds.
It was really intense. It's so sad, but I'm afraid... According to the rules of the game, I have to award you a point, Clement, and say there are 2 seconds left for tall stories, starting now.
This caterpillar was huge.
As Clement was speaking when the whistle went, then he gains yet another point and takes him a little further into the lead. Clement, will you begin the next round for us? Plastic gnomes. Can you talk about that for just a minute, starting now?
The tool that I most like is a Bakelite model.
Geraldine, why have you challenged?
You can't have the two is.
You're picking up on a grammatical error.
A grammatical deviation, yes.
I quite agree. You have a point, and you have 55 seconds for plastic gnomes starting now.
I have a very good friend who bought several plastic gnomes because he lived in a block of flats where everyone took great pride in their gardens, and he felt that this really was a lot of ostentation.
Derek, why have you challenged?
I thought you said, deviation, because if they were living in a block of flats, they couldn't have gardens.
Yes, you do have gardens in some blocks of flats.
Landscapes,
It must be
moreover.
uncomfortable, mustn't it, to have a garden?
Very uncomfortable, but there is a garden...
Can you imagine that...
Don't argue with the chairman, Jerry. That's very naughty.
I know you never do it, do you,
No,
Kenneth?
I don't. Thank you, Nicholas.
Geraldine has another point, and there are 45 seconds left for plastic gnomes starting now.
Instead of flowers, he filled the garden with these quite hideous creatures with red caps and green jackets and blue trousers. And all his neighbours were absolutely furious because they felt it lowered the tone of what was otherwise a very nice bourgeois.
Derek, no, why have you challenged?
Snobbery.
You can be as snobbish as you like as long as you keep playing the game correctly. Geraldine, you have another point. 34 seconds for plastic gnomes starting now.
I was very interested to find that the plastic gnomes took on a particular character because they were living in this rather discriminatory...
Clement, why you challenge?
A plural of gnomes and a singular of character. It's a deviation.
Oh, yes,
He's been absolutely not ever since he was had on two ways. He's been waiting for one challenge only to get back on a singular plural. What was it? A character? What was it again?
I've forgotten, but the audience, the audience applauded.
If you've forgotten, Geraldine has another point.
No,
and there are...
no, I don't. Oh, God.
Because I disagree.
Oh, you see, they don't like you now.
What was your challenge, Clement?
Grammatical deviation.
I know it was grammatical deviation, but what was it?
You should have listened.
Clement Freud, you have a point, and there are 28 seconds left for plastic gnomes starting now.
Rhododendrons are particularly good.
Kenneth Williams, why have you challenge?
Rhododendrons have nothing to do with plastic nose. Deviation.
He's probably going to say, justify in a second, Clement?
Particularly good flowers amongst which to place plastic gnomes. Much more suitable than daisies or watercress.
No points given. 19 seconds left for plastic gnomes. Clement Freud starting now.
And mustard seed is ideal because a blue gnome in a yellow field of this...
Derek Nimmo, why would challenge?
Hesitation.
Hesitation, Derek. 10 seconds left for plastic gnomes starting now.
Well, we're all wandering around talking about it. It's quite obvious that Kenneth Williams is a plastic gnome. I've always thought...
Deviation. It is perfectly obvious to this audience tonight that I am not a plastic gnome.
You have a point, Kenneth. 5 seconds left for plastic gnomes starting now.
These are to be found in the Ideal Gnome exhibition.
Clement Freud, you challenged then. Why? You did challenge. You thought he said something else, so he gets an extra point.
Didn't he?
So, Kenneth has a point. And there are 2 seconds left for Ideal Gnome... I'm sorry. 2 seconds left for plastic gnomes starting now.
And jelly gnomes for sadists to eat.
Geraldine Jones, will you begin the next round? Industrial espionage. I don't know whether you know anything about it, but could you try and talk about it for 60 seconds, starting now?
It has always struck me that industrial espionage is the only branch...
Derek, why would you...
Deviation. It can't always have struck her. Not when she was 3 months old. It couldn't have struck her.
I'm
It
not...
is
How do
always...
you know that at 3 months old, the first thought that struck her, though she wasn't able to put it into words, it might emotionally have been industrial espionage? When we are 3 months old, our emotions are what govern us, not our intellects, and it might have been an emotional thought. 55 seconds left for Geraldine Jones to continue with industrial espionage, starting now.
Industry as a whole is terribly dreary and dismal, and the only part of it that has any sort of drama at all is the spying part. Just imagine all those boring factories full of little men wearing dark glasses and astrakhan collar coats, rushing around, frantically sniffing film in tiny, tiny little cameras.
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Tiny, tiny.
Oh, yes.
Well, it was lovely.
Yes, it was lovely, but it was tiny, tiny, yes. The idea of them sniffing the film, I wonder why they did that.
Well,
what?
Snipping.
Sniffing.
Oh, why did you sniffing the film? Anyway, the Tiny gives Clement Freud another point, and there are 37 seconds left for industrial espionage, starting now.
A man called Arthur Bartlett was probably the most famous industrial spy.
Kenneth Williams, why good chance?
Arthur Bartlett is not the most famous industrial spy. I've never heard such a load of rubbish.
I'm quite prepared to believe he wasn't. Can you prove in 2 seconds that he was?
Of course he was.
Well, of course he wasn't. There are 34 seconds left for Kenneth Williams to continue with industrial espionage, starting now.
This is the process by which, in a manner which can only be called subterfuge, people do find out secret recipes and then convey this information to other people who might find it useful. One of the principal ingredients in lipstick is vegetable fat. And a friend of mine found in a cauldron of it a great rat. Oh, he said, little do they know when they rub that on their lips, there's a big rat been in the thing. Oh, I got it.
Never,
It was lovely, wasn't it?
Well, you enjoyed it anyway, but you should keep going. Come on.
Oh, well,
man.
I saw their faces, you know what I mean?
I know.
Oh, he's like an inquisitor, he is opposite.
They're all three like inquisitors when you're talking. Clement Freud actually challenged you. Clement. Hesitation. Clement, 4 seconds left for industrial espionage, starting now.
He snuck into this factory.
Derek Nimmo, why do you challenge?
Deviation, I don't like the sound of snuck.
Nor do I. What does it mean, Clement?
Hospital sneak.
Oh, no, that is snooped. I don't believe it is the participle of sneak, is it? You're,
Old English Dictionary, yes.
It is. All right, then, Clement Freud. Ian Mester knows his English better than I do, so there are. That's bad grammar, too. There are 2 seconds left for Clement to continue with industrial espionage, starting now.
Put his piece of wire into the safe.
Well, Clement Freud's clever use of the English language gives him, in the space of 2 seconds, 2 points. He really has snuck himself up into a very definite lead at the end of that round. Derek Nimmo, will you begin the next round? My worst moment. 60 seconds, starting now.
This happened to me after recording this program a few weeks ago. I went into a nearby hostelry with the bearded fellows sitting over there chatting to Kenneth Williams, and a man came over to their aforesaid Freud and said... Clement Freud, why do you challenge?
Deviation.
Why?
He hasn't aforesaid Freud.
Came over to...
He was talking about a bearded fellow.
But he didn't. He actually...
Aforesaid Freud implies that the word Freud has been previously mentioned.
He established that he was talking about you, who were sitting there with a beard, talking to Kenneth...
person, but not aforesaid Freud.
No. You are Freud, your name is Freud, isn't it? He established it was you.
I admit it.
Yes, right. Thank you very much. Derek Nimmo has a point. And there are 47 seconds left for my worst Freud, my worst moment starting now.
And a chap came over to this fellow and said, I bet you're surprised to see me here. And when the chap had gone, the chap...
Geraldine, you judge. Hesitation, Geraldine. You take over. My worst moment with 40 seconds left, starting now.
My worst moment took place a very short while ago when I was playing this game, and suddenly it seemed that every single person in this theatre was against me. I made a perfectly valid point, and everyone agreed with these 3 men who outnumber me anyway. They have all the experience. They play week after week, and I come here hot foot from my hard day at the office and try to play, and what happens? They're all against me, and I go on. I don't think that there should only be 3 things in this game to interrupt the fight.
Why do you challenge?
Well, repetition of 3. 3 men opposite me, 3 feet, or...
I think it is such a heart-rendering story, Derek, that I am not going to let you have that challenge.
That's a very good decision.
I'm very good. I'm going to let Geraldine Jones continue. And say there are 9 seconds left, Geraldine, for my worst moment, starting now.
There should be a 4th thing on which to break in on, and that should be discrimination, and then I'd win hands down every week, which is something...
Clement Freud, why have you challenged?
Deviation. It's got nothing to do with my worst moment.
It all sprang from it. I can
She's established...
She's very worked up.
She's very emotional. If she couldn't feel it so deeply, if it wasn't her worst moment, she really feels it very deeply, and I quite agreed. Obviously, was her worst moment for quite a long time. 4 seconds left, Geraldine, starting now.
I have no doubt at all that this moment will leave its traumatic impression upon my mind forever.
Geraldine's worst moment has taken her into a very definite second place behind Clement Freud. Clement, would you start the next round for us? And the subject is a delightful one for you, I'm sure, omelettes. Can you talk about that for 60 seconds, starting now?
These are confections made of eggs to which other ingredients are added. And very few people know that ideally an omelette should be cooked solely by the heat of the pan and not over a flame or electric plate. What you do is get the utensil or...
Derek Nimmo, you've challenged. Why?
Hesitation.
Hesitation, yes. Another interesting thing about this game is that when they have a subject which they really know something about, it's amazing how inhibited they can be and dry up. Derek, you take over the subject of omelettes. 40 seconds left, starting now.
My favorite kind of omelette is a Spanish one, or tortilla, which you find all over the fair land of Spain. And when I get it, it's filled with lovely cold potatoes and onions, and egg, of course, all round the outside. And I go up to a little local bar or hostelry and say, quiero una tortilla, por favor. And they say, oh, how nice you are. Yes, here's your old omelette, and I take it away, put it on the lovely plate, and there with wine and what?
Clement Freud, you challenge.
Repetition of tortilla.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely right, yes.
Yes. Oh, they're getting magnanimous now and admitting their mistakes for the first time. There was too much tortilla. There are 23 seconds left for omelettes, starting now.
When the copper sauteuse has reached a sufficient...
Derek Nimmo, why would you challenge?
Well, I thought I detected a hesitation.
No, I think it was a strange word he used.
Well, I'm very sorry.
Yes, all right. Now, isn't it? Clement Freud has another point, and 19 and a half seconds left for omelettes, starting now. Derek Nimmo, you've challenged.
Well, he didn't do anything, did he?
No, he didn't. And Derek, you now have 18 seconds in which to make an omelette, starting now.
So I got hold of this frying pan and I put it on top of the fire. And today I poured the eggs on top after cracking them all very hard on the side of the pan. And then I sat down on a lovely table covered with the finest...
Clement Freud, why would you challenge?
Deviation, sitting on a lovely table. Then I sat down on a lovely
table.
He sat down on a lovely table.
Really?
Yes, I think...
Well, I like sitting on tables.
Did you? That's all. Clement Freud, you have another point and 5 seconds left for omelettes, starting now.
Mushrooms, tomatoes, and onions are the favorite fillings, but cheese is coming up in the league table.
At the end of that round, Clement Freud has increased his lead just a little over Geraldine Jones, and Kenneth and Derek are trailing somewhat. Kenneth, the subject is Hamlet. Can you discourse on that for 60 seconds, starting now?
This is one of Shakespeare's most brilliant morality plays, and I suppose it does provide sort of ambitious part for which any young actor could become inflamed. And it's unique insofar as the author has given quite explicit instructions for the performer. Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue, or do not mouth it, as some of your players do. I would say the town crier spoke my lines. Nor speak no more than is set down, for there be of some that will laugh to set on some barren quantity of spectators to laugh also, though in the meantime some necessary question of the play be then to be considered that's villainous, and show the most pitiful ambition in the fool that uses it. Pray you, avoid it.
Yes. Derek Nimmo, he said, pray you avoid it, but you didn't. You challenged. Why?
Well, repetition of ambition, actually. Ambition at the beginning, ambition for any actor, ambition at the end of the speech.
I think if you can keep going in this game with a speech of Hamlet's and at the pace that Kenneth did it, he just deserved to get a point.
Yes, but if you could lose yours, we're all around and losing theirs. He's absolutely right. He's got a valid point. He's right. He's a valid point. He was listening carefully. He was listening carefully, and that's how we've got to play the game. That's right. No, give him his due. Give him his due.
You're all being so generous now. You really want me to give it to him? I've already awarded it to you. You can take it. They want it. The audience want Kenneth to finish, don't you? Yes. Kenneth, you have your point. You have 17 seconds to continue with Hamlet, starting now.
And, of course, we all know it is largely around the question of doubt that the play hinges. Should I do such a thing? Or, and not to use the word should, lest I be accused...
Derek Nimmo. Repetition he did.
Oh, it's annoying.
I award a point to Derek Nimmo for his challenge. There are 3 seconds left for Hamlet. Derek, starting
Ham is a diminutive form of the Anglo-Saxon word ham, meaning cow.
Geraldine Jones, will you take the next round, please? In fact, it's your turn to take the next round. The subject is stupidity, which is not applied to you in any way. I can't think why EMS has put it on the card for you to start with, but will you try and talk about it for 60 seconds, starting now?
Unlike our respected chairman, I don't believe that I need to be stupid in order to talk about stupidity. In fact, it seems to me that the best qualified people to discuss this subject are those who are never, ever guilty of it. Of these, I am naturally one. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to speak for so many minutes without raising the smallest laugh, because everybody knows that laughs generally are generated by something somehow or other stupid. I'm getting very stony.
Kenneth Williams, why do you challenge?
Well, deviation. She's running herself down rotten.
Yes, but you can't just be devious because you're running yourself down. You're allowed to do that. Now, if you had said that it is devious because laughter is not always produced from something which is stupid, I think is often produced from highly intelligent things, I would have agreed. But as you didn't, I agree with Geraldine Jones has another point, and there are 33 seconds left for stupidity, Geraldine, starting now.
The stupidity that we show in this game, of course, is a nice thought, and...
Derek, why have you challenged?
Repetition of game.
Yes, she did say a game before, because she was talking about it. Derek, there are 30 seconds for you to take over stupidity, starting now.
I think the most interesting definition of this word is contained within the book of the prophet Micah. O listen, ye children of Israel. The most stupid of men are the most loved of the Lord Jehovah. And I've always found this to be a most interesting thought, because it's helped me tremendously through life, because I am blessed with stupidity. It has been my greatest natural asset. People look at me on the street and say, "How you great stop saying?"
Never in a program have I heard such bearing of souls. Geraldine going about her worst moment, Derek about his stupidity, Kenneth about his Hamlet, and Clement showing us that he cannot make an omelette without drying up. So, we've now reached the end of yet another edition of Just a Minute. And a very interesting result. Kenneth was in fourth place just behind Geraldine, who was 1 point behind Derek Nimmo. But by a very definite lead, this week's winner, Clement Freud. We do hope you've enjoyed this particular edition of Just a Minute. And from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The program was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Simon Brett. Present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Nicholas Parsons, and Sheila Hancock in Just a Minute. And as the minute was fades away, here to tell you about it is this week's chairman, Clement Freud.
Thank you for that tremendously warm welcome. Let me just remind you how this game is played. Each panelist is going to be given a subject and will have to talk about it for 60 seconds without deviating from it, without hesitating, and without repeating himself. And the first subject today goes to the newest member of the panel, who is actually the oldest chairman we ever had, Nicholas Parsons. Nicholas, will you speak for 1 minute on the Blarney Stone, starting now?
The Blarney Stone is a piece of rock in a castle in a village outside Cork in Southern Ireland. It is considered that if you manage to kiss this particular Blarney Stone...
Hesitation.
Unfair!
Great pleasure. Hesitation.
Can we just... Derek, I believe you challenged.
Yes, I challenge on the grounds of hesitation.
You have the subject of the Blarney Stone. You have 47 seconds to go, starting now.
When I first met Blarney Stone, it was in a small castle in Southern Ireland. The very first...
Nick, you buzz.
I've said repetition. I've said Southern Ireland. I've said a small
This
castle.
was a gentleman called Blarney Stone.
Yes, but I have already said Southern Ireland.
Stop arguing. Nick, you get a point. You've got 41 seconds on the Blarney Stone starting now.
If you...
Derek, you buzz.
Hesitation.
Shut up. Nick, you have another point, the Blarney Stone.
How are you, Kenneth? All right? Just tell them you're here. Say something to me.
I'm perfectly all right, Sheila. I'm listening now. Go on.
If you kiss the Blarney Stone, it's considered that you have the gift of eloquence.
Derek, you buzz.
Well, he said if you kissed before.
That's absolutely correct.
Well,
Derek,
I love kissing. I mean...
Derek has another point. He has the Blarney Stone. He has 34 seconds starting now.
This particular piece of masonry was hewed from the earth some 789 years ago, come next Pancake Tuesday. The interesting thing about it, in attendance at the time, was the Thane of Freud, which is one of the smaller villages outside...
Kenneth, you talent.
Abbreviation, there aren't any Thames in Ireland. Scots term.
Well done.
Kenneth, you have a point. You have 18 seconds, and the Blarney Stone starting now.
This stone has its name, Blarney, which is connoted in Ireland with to mull over, to, so to speak, gloss and add...
Derek, you buzz.
Repetition 2 twos.
I think that's right, actually. Yes, Derek, you have another point. You have the Blarney Stone for 6 seconds, starting now.
Early in the 19th century, there was a determined attempt by a group of Englishmen to steal this piece of rock and bring it back to...
Repetition of a piece of rock. He said it before.
He did. You get a point. You have 2 seconds. The Blarney Stone, starting now.
It is also considered you have the gift of the gab.
As Nicholas was talking while the whistle went, he gets another point, and he shares the lead with Derek Nimmo, and they are just ahead of Kenneth Williams, and Sheila Hancock is there.
Bottom.
Still.
Yes, go on,
No.
say it. I don't care. I don't care.
It's all a bit creepy, isn't it, though?
Sheila, it's your turn.
Oh.
The subject is magic for 1 minute, starting now.
This is something with which I could not do without. To start with, you have the sort of conjuring magic. Ow!
Yes,
Get off.
I'm afraid so. Derek, you have a point. You have magic. 54 seconds, starting now.
I remember going to the Roman Empire in the old days, and there seeing wonderful magicians standing there, pulling out of bags rabbits, out of the sleeves of that...
Kenneth, you buzz.
2 outs.
2 outs, so quite a
Kenneth, I would give no more duplication of prepositions.
He said 2.
Derek has the subject back.
Oh,
46
yeah.
seconds.
play like that, is
Magic, starting now.
2 little gnomes and 1 pixie held a wand high in the air.
Sheila.
Deviation, this isn't true.
It's magic.
Gnomes and pixies. You've never met a gnome in your life apart from Kenneth.
Sheila, you're absolutely right. He's never met a gnome in his life. You have the subject. You have 36 seconds on magic, starting now.
There are certain people who have magic, like Clement Freud. He has a great magic.
Deviation. Clement Freud has no magic.
Another point, Sheila. 31 seconds. Sheila, starting now.
Kenneth Williams has it off and on. Derek has it mainly off. We also sometimes say in the theatre, the magic happened tonight, which means that a sort of communion happens between you and the audience. It's nothing to do with how you work, it's just something that happens. The other day, my little girl was watching her daddy doing a card trick, and I explained to her how the card trick was done, because I'm an immensely practical man.
Nick, you buzz.
Repetition of card trick.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Very ungallant. Little
Yes.
carnage.
Well, she was going for a
yes,
long
yes,
time.
yes. Well, Nick, you have magic for 6 seconds. And another point, starting now.
Some of the best magic you can see comes from television. The other two has to say...
Derek, you have a challenge.
It doesn't.
You made terribly unfair of me to judge.
You've got to make the decision, love.
I'll tell you what, do score no points like I do and leave the
Shut
subject
up.
to me.
Derek, you have the subject for 1 second. Magic starting now.
Houdini was a very great.
And as Derek was talking, while the whistle went, he gets another point, and Kenneth gets the next subject. Will you speak for 1 minute, please, on laughter, starting now?
This sometimes happens through serendipity and sometimes through the machinations or otherwise of professional comedians. Roby came on once and said, "My last audience simply adored me. The reception I got was sublime. They made me a present of Mornington Crescent and threw it a brick at a time." Another notable comedian, Nellie Wallace.
Nick, you challenge.
Repetition of comedian.
I said comedian.
Comedian.
Or, Kenneth, you have another point. You have 33 seconds. Nicholas, be quiet. 33 seconds on laughter starting now.
And she cried out, "I'm in the garden watching the birds, wheeling and turning, waiting for them to drop a message by carrier pigeon." And they said, "Waiting for it, you're asking for it." And laughter was produced with these wonderful lines. "Such a nice young man he was, always held me purse, said the change did him good." Another laugh getter. Indeed, it's the most healthy sound that ever issued forth from the human body.
Kenneth Williams gets another point because he was speaking while the whistle went, which puts him 1 point behind Nicholas and a few points behind Derek.
So I'm creeping
Nimmo.
up, really, aren't I?
You're creeping up, and Derek Nimmo is in the lead
Creeping, if you don't mind.
and has the next subject, which is hobgoblins. Will you speak about hobgoblins for 1 minute, starting now?
Source of great regret to me that people these days tend not to believe in fairies and gnomes and pixies, and in particular in hobgoblins. But all of you here who are privileged to look at Kenneth Williams tonight will know without any doubt they do still exist. What is a hobgoblin? A small...
Nicholas, you challenge.
Deviation, I don't believe that Kenneth Williams is a hobgoblin. I think he's a human being.
This is not a game in which you spread your beliefs. Derek, you have another point. You have hobgoblins. You've got 41 seconds, starting now.
A small, ugly, mischievous demon is a hobgoblin. And that is what we see here.
Sheila.
I'm not going to have that. He's not ugly.
Sheila, you're quite right. You have a point. You've got the subject. You've got 35 seconds, starting now.
Hobgoblins are little... Oh, go on, I know.
A hesitation.
You're absolute.
You are a swine, Nimmo. Sheila has another point. She has another hobgoblin. She has 30 seconds,
say about
starting
hobgoblins.
now.
Goblins that live in the hob. They sit on the kettle and bubble. That's what hobgoblins are. They have little horns and red trousers. They walk around in the fireplace.
Derek, you challenge.
A hesitation.
Yeah.
I'm afraid
I
it
do
was
have to
hesitation.
breathe, you know.
Yes, I know.
Derek, you have another point. 18 seconds, hobgoblin, starting
In
now.
the Sun King's court.
Nick, you challenge.
Hesitation.
You have a point. You have hobgoblins, 15 seconds.
These hobgoblins all
Nick.
came down to this...
Nick, you have 15 seconds, starting now.
These hobgoblins all came down to this big house.
Derek, you challenge.
Repetition, you just said it.
Nick, you have another point. 13 seconds on hobgoblins, starting now.
These particular creatures came into this house with the 3 lads.
Derek, you challenge.
Repetition, is it? Yeah.
That, I think, really was repetition. Derek, you have a point. You have 10 seconds on hobgoblins, starting now.
The Gobelin tapestries were the most famous creations.
Nick, you challenge.
No,
I challenged you.
Kenneth.
Yes, because he wasn't saying goblin, he said gobelin.
I think Gobelin is absolutely legitimate.
Well, then why haven't we been saying that all along? Why have we all been saying Goblin?
Of the subject.
You're no gent.
I'm a gentleman. And Derek has another point. And you have 8 more seconds, starting now.
And Jacques Aubes was the most famous tapestry worker and the most sought after.
Nick, you tell me.
Repetition of tapestry.
Oh,
that's quite right. You have another point. You have the subject. 3 seconds, starting now.
The 3 lads lived in this house and their names were Ken, Clem.
Nicholas gets another point because he was speaking while the whistle went. He's now 3 points behind Derek and some way ahead of Sheila Hancock, who is just ahead of Kenneth Williams.
Who am I? Oh.
And Nicholas has the next subject. Will you speak for 1 minute, please, on crumpets? Starting now.
Crumpets are absolutely delicious. Well toasted with plenty of butter on them. You can have them for pretty well any meal you like. I love them myself. Of course, in the Midlands, they're usually referred to as pikelets. In other parts of the country, they're sometimes called muffins. In the singular, this word has a quite different meaning. It usually means a woman of very easy virtue. And if you enter any script at all, it is sure to get a laugh. Immediately you get a reaction from the audience if you say the word crumpet. If you put this into a thing on the radio, you will...
Sheila, you tell us.
Hesitation.
You get a point, you get the subject, you have 25 seconds on crumpets, starting now.
One of my happiest memories as a child was Sunday tea, when we always had crumpets or muffins and butter with honey on. My father used to cook them with a knife, and he used to scream all the while because he always burnt his hand. And nothing would induce him to use the toasting fork. It was part of the ritual. Always used to drop off, and we always burnt at least 3 crumpets out of the packets of 6. But it was a thing that we enjoyed very much. We then used to put them on a plate in the hearth, and all the butter soaked
Sheila, you get another point because you were talking
Oh,
when
and
the
you
whistle
were also
went.
gallant, because I did say always an awful lot.
Did you? I
Yes,
didn't
you
know.
did.
I thought
The whole thing. Mouths were watering. I could feel the butter.
You're now... Sheila is now substantially in 3rd place behind Nick, who is definitively in 2nd place behind Derek Nimmo, who is currently in the lead. Sheila, you start the next round with landladies. Will you speak for 1 minute on landladies, starting now?
These are both the terror and the delight of my life. Most of my early days have been spent in digs, as I'm sure most of the people on this panel. When you're in the theatre, you don't have a home at all until you settle in the West End. And from the day I was 16, I lived in digs. Oh, yes.
Derek, you bust. Repetition. Derek, you have the subject for 43 seconds. Landladies, starting now.
During the war, we used to have a lot of land girls working on the fields of...
Kenneth.
Deviation, such as landladies, not land girls.
May I please substantiate?
If you could have had him for hesitation, but for deviation, I won't give it. Derek, you get another point. You have landladies.
Deviation on me.
39 seconds, starting now.
As they matured and aged, they became landladies. And a splendid job of work they did.
Kenneth.
Deviation, they never began as land girls to become landladies. Such a maturity did not occur.
I think they could quite easily have become landladies.
They certainly didn't. I'm telling you, Ducky.
I'm with you.
Yes, I have to know you weren't alive at the time.
No, it's absolutely true. I wasn't. Derek, you have another point.
Oh, he's with him, isn't he?
It's nepotism. Nepotism. It's an old nepot. You can see it from here.
You have nepotic landladies. 33 seconds, starting now.
Mrs. McFadden, who lives in Glasgow, keeps a lovely house with a warm bed sitting room where I go and stay every time I'm there. And there I have teas brought into me, lovely cold fire to warm my cold hand. I remember going back there on a Tuesday evening in Lent, and the funny thing was that she'd given up fish for Lent, and I said, how very kind, and I said, it's twice time to be stopped.
Kenneth.
2 Lents.
2 lengths. You have a point. You have a subject. You have 3 seconds, starting now.
The best landlady I ever met was Sheila Hancock when she played the landlady in the review I was in with her.
You know, I never thought we would get to the end of the landladies, but we have. And Derek is now really rather extravagantly in the lead.
Really very odd.
Derek, you have the next subject. Will you speak for 1 minute on taking risks? And will you start now?
Well, of course, I do think of all the great truisms, this one is perhaps the most true, that one should always try to take risks. And we have done tonight, for instance. We have sitting up there as our chairman, Clement Freud, looking like a reincarnation of Genghis Khan.
Kenneth, you tell us.
Deviation. Clement Freud does not look like the reincarnation.
You needn't go on. You have a point. Kenneth, you have 42 seconds on taking risks, starting now.
This involves, of course, vulnerability, and it's something about which I am an authority. Whenever one takes a step, be it into the middle of the road, there is the danger that we might be run over or...
Sheila.
Deviation is a pretty funny step that gets you right into the middle of the road.
Sheila, you have a point. Taking risks, 22 seconds, starting now.
One of the most classic examples.
Totally right, but he's a cocky.
Derek, you challenge for hesitation.
He hits me all the time. You do.
When have I...
I can feel you wobbling.
Will you stop?
Deviation.
He flies his arms around and wriggles. Go on,
They've
then,
stopped
go
wriggling
on.
now, Derek. You have the subject back. Taking risks, 21 seconds, starting now.
Well, another risk that we've taken tonight is having that genial Nicholas Parsons on the panel.
Nick, you tell
A hesitation before the nit and also deviation for the Nicholas Parsons nit.
Nicholas Parsons gets the subject, 16 seconds on taking risks, starting now.
I took a very big risk when I decided to become on the chair of this particular program and allow Clement...
Kenneth, you tell us.
To become on the chair. To become on the chair? What's he going to do on this chair? That's what I want to know. What's he going to become? I'm waiting for an ectoplasm.
You have...
Something smells like a bit of addict up here. Someone poured their tea with them.
You have made your point, you have got your point, you've got the subject, you have 11 seconds, taking risks, starting now.
And all our lives we go out with this terrible misfortune hanging over our heads like a sword of Damocles.
Deviation. We all haven't got this terrible misfortune. Only Kenneth Williams has this terrible hanging about him.
No, I think that's not a valid, not a valid deviation.
Well,
you have the subject back, you have an extra point, you've only got 3 seconds, I'm with you, starting now.
But if you wear a lucky charm and keep your picker up, just think to yourself, well, I'll get
Kenneth, you have leapt past Sheila Hancock.
Oh, am I in the lead?
No, you don't overdo it. You have leapt past Sheila Hancock.
Well, who is in the lead?
Derek, who is in front of Nick.
How does he do it? I mean, his performance has been totally inept.
He breathes down your neck.
Nicholas, you have plenty of chance to breathe down people's necks,
over there.
because you have the next subject. It is gibberish. And you may talk about gibberish for 1 minute without deviating, without hesitating, and without repeating yourself for a period of 60 seconds, starting now.
Quand j'entends vivre son complet voir, j'entends faire un école, parce que c'est rien, oui, oui, j'entends faire un école, j'entends voir, j'entends faire un école, nous aussi, j'entends oui, on peut tout voir, j'entends faire un jeune ami, j'entends faire un école, on en fait un petit peu, j'entends
Derek, you challenge. Nick. Nick, you were challenged about 48 seconds.
I couldn't
Otherwise, you would have gone on. You challenged.
On the grounds of repetition.
Yes, I was omelette sur le visage.
I think I must give you the point, Derek Nimmo.
I didn't repeat anything the whole time. It was pure gibberish.
But
pure.
As it continued to be gibberish, it was repetition, and therefore... Derek has the subject, 53 seconds starting now.
Fortune blood, come around, Clement Freud, Nicholas Parsons, can you stand up, Claudio, nothing is one, fatiga, la fonica, 1, 2, well, la fatiga, la down, but 2 o'clock, and 4 in the right, and under the bottom, like, around the body, around the monkey game,
Derek, you're nowhere near the end because Nick challenged you. And I think on the same grounds, I must give it to Nick.
I challenge him in exactly the same grounds.
Exactly.
But actually, I can substantiate my challenge. He actually, ha, 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 ha. That is definitely...
I've already given it to you. You're in danger of losing it. But you have got it for 38 seconds gibberish starting now.
Grancio mangiaro, veramente barbo, sconciotto ormere, fantoro, canticcio, mangiata venti, manioro, confiutno manzitti impentero.
Derek, you challenged.
Repetition of O.
Nick, you have an extra point. You have the subject. You have another 28 seconds starting now.
This is a most fascinating subject. Gibberish is, of course, the obliteration of sense, and you put words together in such conjunctivation that you do not understand them. The audience is mystified, puzzled beyond
Kenneth,
words.
You challenged.
Conjunctivation. Conjunction exists. Conjunctivation doesn't.
It does in my vocabulary.
Kenneth, you have a point.
Something
you have the
wrong
subject.
with your eyes.
Conjunctive.
What did you say?
Kenneth. Gibberish for 18 seconds starting now.
I really don't understand it, but if somebody says, Trevor, very quickly, the ancient British sparkle with the wax or Ulysses, something the ear, the order of our siren.
Nick, you challenged.
Well, I get him on the same as before, repetition.
No, you don't.
Not
Kenneth, you have another point. You have 12 seconds to go starting now.
Then I would say positive focus trends up in the early morning, waiting for the clarity in the Milo.
Nick, you challenged.
Repetition is already said. That cuts it up to know that all the Bible.
Kenneth has another point and is creeping up very quickly indeed. 9 seconds to go, starting now.
In the luxury flabber block with a dangly chandelier in it, Harry the Acres and Catherine of Arabold.
Nick, you challenge.
Hesitation.
Hesitation is right. You get another point, Nick. You've got 1.5 seconds, starting now.
If you can talk about gibberish, why not?
That brings us to the end of this edition of Just a Minute.
Time to.
The winner, let's do it in the reverse order, as was done by Nicholas Parsons, who was once chairman of this program. And in fourth place was Sheila Hancock. In third place, Kenneth Williams. And in second place, 1 point behind this week's winner was Nicholas Parsons. Which means that the winner this week was Derek Nimmo.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Clement Freud. The program was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Simon Brett.